Okay, calling the Ways and Means Informational Briefing to order. So today we're here from Hawaii Tourism Authority, HTA Board Representatives, DBED, DAGS, and the Procurement Office, the Attorney General, CNHA, and HVCB. So on the agenda, we asked the agencies and the organizations what to be prepared for. So we can start with HTA. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. John DeFries, President and CEO of the Hawaii Tourism Authority. We've been asked to provide a timeline of the process that led to the rescinding of RFP 22-01, as well as provide information on our role in rescinding of the RFP 22-01. In the timeline, the dates that I will be describing are all 2022. April 15th, RFP 22-01 is released. June 2nd, an award is announced to the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement. June 21, HVCB files a protest which moves to Director McCartney as HOPA for resolution. August 3, last day of work for Chief Administrative Officer Keith Regan, who served as Procurement Officer for RFP 22-01. Keith moved on to the Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs. October 5, joint statement issued announcing that a potential pathway toward resolution was identified by CNHA, HVCB, DBED, and HTA. November 28, Director McCartney discusses the possibility of rescission at the WAM Informational Briefing. November 30, following up on WAM's suggestion to discuss the matter with the HTA board, Governor Ige convenes an executive session of the HTA board under HRS section 92-2.5F. No board action was taken at this meeting. December 1, agenda posted for special HTA board meeting on December 7, including an update by Director McCartney on RFP 22-01, as well as agenda items for the board to consider action on that topic. December 5, at 11:52 a.m., HTA receives copies via email letters to CNHA and HVCB announcing Director McCartney's decision to rescind the June 2nd award and cancel RFP 22-01. Director McCartney's term ended at 12 noon that afternoon. HTA begins discussions with Acting Director of DBED, Chris Sariyasu, on next steps. December 7, special HTA board meeting is convened with Governor Green in attendance. Former Director McCartney presents his reasoning and rationale for rescinding the award. The board defers action on matters related to RFP 22-01. In response to the question as to the role that HTA played or did not play in rescinding RFP 22-01, HTA staff and board were supportive and responsive to requests for information from Director McCartney in his role as HOPA to assist him in making the decision. Once the award protest moved to Director McCartney as HOPA for resolution, HTA staff and board had no formal role in the rescission. HTA was informed at 11:52 on December 5 that Director McCartney rescinded the award via email to myself, Chief Administrative Officer Acting Mark Togashi, Chief Brand Officer Kalani Ka'ana'ana, and Board Chair George Camp. Thank you.
When Keith Regan was the procurement officer, and I guess it was also Rodriguez, when did it get transferred back to the DBED director as being the HOPA?
It got transferred back each time at the time the award was protested. So let me make sure I got the correct dates here.
So, okay, just kind of figuring out, not necessarily with the dates with my train of thought, just kind of the order of events or sequence of events. So the protest occurred and then the DBED director says, I'll be the HOPA.
Sir, if I can help answer that question.
No, we're talking to. What happened? How does he send a memo? What is it? Is it email? How does he say, I'm taking this over?
He's not, we're also being advised by our Deputy Attorney General, Greg Kinkley, on the procedural steps that should follow. And at the time of the protest, we were advised by Deputy AG that the responsibility now moves to HOPA for review and resolution.
Okay, so what I don't understand is how does it keep going back and forth between HTA and the DBED director? Because at some point, if the DBED director is not just acting as the procurement officer, saying if you follow procurement or not, but actually dictating the next steps.
Well, it actually happened twice, as you know, that timeline I gave you was limited to events in 2022. So when the initial RFP was issued, October 5 of 2021, the award was announced to HBCB on December 10, 2021. And at that point, CNHA files a protest. When that protest is filed, it then moves to the HOPA or DBED director. So it occurred in both cases where protests were filed in each scenario.
Okay,
Yeah.
but then it wasn't only the protest, because my understanding from the last meeting, the DBED director also determined who was going to be on the selection committee, amending the RFP between RFP 1 and RFP 2.
In both cases, the DBED director requested the opportunity to review the makeup of the selection committee and also to review and provide input on the drafting of both RFPs.
Okay,
Which
in his capacity as HOPA?
in his capacity as DBED director and us being an attached agency at that point.
Okay, and in what other cases did the DBED director do this before? That, like the Japan contract? And what other contracts?
The Japan contract as well. There was a review by Director McCartney at that time of that evaluation committee as well as the RFP.
Okay, so all major contracts went through the DBED director.
He was given the opportunity to review it, yeah.
Okay, well, at the last meeting, it sounded it was more than just review.
You know, I don't think he provided feedback and input. I don't know if I can ask Kalani, who has more specific information to offer this, but Kalani, if you wouldn't mind.
Hello, members. Kalani Ka'ama'ama'adra. Oh, just kidding. Chief Brand Officer, Hawai'i Tourism Authority. Sorry, where am I filling in?
The interaction between DBED director / HOPA relative to reviewing the evaluation committee, as well as draft of the RFPs before finalized.
Sure. Former Director McCartney did ask for the ability to review each step of the procurement along the way, including the evaluation committee members' makeup. A memo was transmitted to him, communicating that as well. And then he also asked to see the RFP document itself.
And is that normal for all your RFPs?
No, it's not.
Members' questions?
Thank you for that information. My question is, at any time, if you guys were concerned, did you guys consult the Attorney General's office?
I defer to John and our
Yes.
chief admin.
We are in relatively constant touch with our own Deputy Attorney General on this matter throughout.
Well, the last time the Attorney General said the first time they heard about this was when they saw it in the paper.
The first time
The first time the Attorney General read about the governor's announcement of breaking up of some kind of settlement agreement that you had announced with the governor and the DBED director. You don't remember?
No, it was a that announcement.
And
in
that's
which
when-
there were 3 quotes from myself,
Yeah,
Leo Lewis,
yeah,
Director McCartney, and HVCB.
yeah. And that's when the procurement officer had said she had no idea about that. She learned about it in a press release. The Attorney General said that they had learned about it in the paper. So that's where I get confused as to if the Attorney General's with them every step, yet they learn about this settlement in the paper.
Yeah, I did not have any contact with SBO on that particular announcement, and I did hear her testimony at the last session. My reference to Deputy Attorney General is Greg Kinkley, who is assigned to HTA and DBED, with whom we are in relatively constant touch. But I did not speak to SBO on this.
I guess my question goes more to whether or not, if you felt that the DBED director was interfering with the process, was there any questions asked of the Attorney General to determine where the line should be drawn?
At all times, in my interpretation of the direction I was receiving was Director McCartney was acting within the scope of his office.
To be both director and HOPA?
Within the boundaries of Director and HOPA. I never got the sense from.
Okay, is that
any-
written
That's
someplace?
what I asked last time. Yeah.
It is,
Was it?
it is
what
not,
was
I
it?
mean, not, it is not, but I mean, the Deputy Attorney General's here. To
Yes,
offer testimony.
I mean, that's what we had asked last time. This seems to be only HTA that the DBED director has this relationship with. But there's not, that they haven't been able to provide anything in writing as to which duties as HOPA the director is going to retain and which he's delegating to HTA. Which I thought was kind of confusing.
Good question.
So when did you folks lose your procurement exemption?
So
When did you lose the procurement exemption?
we lost the procurement exemption in following the 2021 legislative session.
So as of July 2021,
Correct.
okay, so a year and a half, you have a year and a half of not having the exemption. Okay, so prior to of losing the exemption, you folks handled all your procurement, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, and under that, you folks followed the procurement law, correct?
We would have followed the board approved HTA procurement policy.
Right, which is in keeping with the procurement law,
Yes.
because when I was tourism chair, we put that exemption in based on the fact that you would still follow the
Yes,
procurement law,
correct.
but you would be able to move things along quicker and not have to jump through all of the hoops. So when you lost your exemption, you still had procurements prior to this one, right?
Correct.
And that procurement would still have fall under the DBED director or HOPA, correct? All those procurements?
That the major contract would have preceded my arrival. Colonel, you may have more.
I just want to understand the nuance to the question. So
So since July
Yes.
twenty
the first
twenty-one,
procurement we issued under 103D was 22-01.
oh, so you didn't have any other?
Because July, you folks passed and overrode the governor's veto, passing 862 in special session. And then by October, we were issuing the first RFP 22-01. So there was a 3-month window from the time that you all passed the override through when we issued our first procurement, which was 22-01.
Okay, and Keith Regan was the one that oversaw that,
That was Ronald Rodriguez at that,
or Rodriguez. And when did Regan take over?
after the second round. Right, Mark?
So what did you do differently for
The,
this procurement other than giving it to HOPA when there was a protest?
both, when we lost the exemption, both Keith Regan and Ronald Rodriguez were delegated procurement authority by DBED in August of 2021. Following the passage, I believe, of HB 862. If I got that right. So I'm sorry, to your question,
So both of them were in charge
in
of,
2021.
okay. So what did you do differently for this contract in 2201 when you lost the exemption that you weren't doing before, other than giving it to HOPA for review?
I think much of the language in the RFPs after we were placed under 103D were reformatted, different language was inserted to reference statute and administrative rules, that sort of stuff. That was the biggest difference. And then also later on in the second iteration, language further clarifying respect to ARPA funding.
Yeah, but as far as selecting the procurement review committee, evaluation committee, as far as putting out the bid, as far as making the awards, that didn't change,
That didn't
right?
change.
That
The
didn't
general
change.
process stayed
Yeah.
the same. Former Director McCartney asked for oversight of those things.
And in each case, both of them resulted in an award.
Okay, and when he asked for review, you could have said it wasn't proper, or, I mean, was that a mandated review that he asked for to be involved with the selection committee? Was that mandated by him, or was that a request?
You know, it was I don't know, I wouldn't use the term mandated, I mean, but he certainly requested that would happen. I'm not,
Okay, did you
it wasn't,
request to your board?
what's that?
Did you take that request to the board?
I did not.
So you made an executive decision to allow him to have this access.
I did, and on the evaluation committee, were also my board and my board chair and vice chair.
So you didn't think you should have gotten,
But I didn't take it to the full board, no.
or you didn't think you should ask the procurement officer on that? Did you question Hinckley about that?
Did I question?
Like you had to, or was that interfering? Did you check with Hinckley on that?
And I did not consider it interfering, actually, and maybe in hindsight and through this process, I need to pay more attention to that, but at the time I was doing it, I didn't see that as interference at all.
Okay, thank you.
So when he requested the oversight, how did he request it?
He requested it verbally to me. And I believe also to Kalani. I'm not only referring to Kalani as chief brand officer, but Kalani chaired the evaluation committee as well.
So it was just a phone call, or was it in person?
At different times in different ways, but generally verbally and generally in person,
Nothing documented.
not that I can recall.
This doesn't concern you that you guys are making decisions on your own without it being transparent and to your board? And by way of just a verbal request, that this kind of legal issue of a procurement will involve thousands and millions of dollars that could go to court at one point, and you just making these off the cuff decisions?
You know, my interaction with Mike as DBED director, I always thought was a collaborative effort. And I derived a lot of benefit from that in terms of his experience in his background in this body as well as at HCA. So to that extent, I never thought at any time that it was anything else but a healthy collaborative effort. If in fact, I blurred the lines by doing that, I take full responsibility for that.
Well, collaboration is one thing, but when you give up your authority and responsibility without checking with the powers to be, without checking with the procurement officer to make sure that you are following the law so that it doesn't come back to bite you in the butt, like it is now, when you don't follow it the way it's supposed to, whether you're collaborative or not, whether you're friends or not. You know, you have to make sure that you're following the steps, because these are legal issues that needs to be documented. And as the executive director, that's something that you should be aware of.
I understand that. Thank you.
Because he, you know, I know Mike knew a lot, and there in itself, there could be some kind of conflict, because having been there before and now things are different, right? I mean, so, you know, there's always issues like that. And again, that exercise caution and exercise of judgment falls squarely on your shoulders. And your board needs to take that into consideration when they're looking at who's going to lead the organization. Thank you.
I guess my question is, throughout the process and along the process that this occurred, where was the Attorney General, or where were you going back to the Attorney General and saying, am I within my legal right to be engaging this conversation with Mike?
You know, throughout the process, we were cognizant of the fact that we needed to be compliant. And so there was frequent interaction, meetings, phone calls to ensure that the steps we were taking or about to take were in compliance with the procurement. And my primary contact was both my board chair and the Deputy Attorney General.
So the logistic of what I getting the minute the protest came upon the proposal shows me that it wasn't, number one, it was challenged. Number two is either some kind of educational process of what the responsibility of the board should be, needs to be maybe one education process, because we're talking about two proposals that are forward now that will become a third proposal with preview of anybody now to put in that has literally destroyed the faith of government in selection process of the industry. And, you know, it's hard to swallow, whether it be for myself or anybody that sits on this committee, because we put faith into a board that will ask those questions. Yeah. And even as the hopeful individual that has come back to you guys asking for your advice, I think that should have been at that point a separation of powers advised by the Attorney General, whether or not the conversation that you had directly with the Attorney General and advice given back. But so I just taken us back with where we are today, because there's huge ramifications going forward. Basically, what is the plan now going forward? And is there an education component that the board needs to now take? And whether or not we'll have legal challenges in the process.
You know, I would say this, that myself, Cleo Lewis at CNHA and John Monahan at HVCB, I think all of us, for our own reasons, wanted the protest to result in an up or down decision.
Which one? The first time or the second?
Both of them. Just like to understand whether we were compliant or non-compliant, right? And in both cases, the Director McCartney has so far issued letters to the effect rescinding the award in both cases and citing not the protest itself, but the best interest of Hawaii, right? And so, yeah,
Except if we were in the private sector and you were trying to do a marketing contract for Sheraton, whoever sent out the RFP or the request for a proposal and it fell apart, then you would do it again, it fell apart. Now we're going to go a third time. Whoever did that, they'd probably be fired by if this were the private sector. So something, I just,
they wouldn't be fired.
what are the consequences?
They wouldn't be fired for something as broad and ethereal as the best interest of Hawaii. They would be fired because there was actual evidence of violations.
Well, they would be fired because they couldn't get a reasonable outcome that was supposed to occur. I mean, there's performance standards we're talking about.
No, I agree, which is why I would encourage all of us to think about getting our procurement exemption back. So this doesn't happen again. And I realize that's a stretch, but it worked.
Just because you don't want to follow the law, that doesn't mean you go ask for an exemption.
It isn't.
There's a process. I'm still really confused as to when it goes back and forth between HTA and the DBED director. Because if you're one of the contractors, who do you go? You're entering this, you're applying to the RFP thinking that you're dealing with HTA.
Correct.
Going back and forth. And now you have to deal with DBED and you don't know if it's HTA. There's a lot of confusion throughout the whole process.
And what the contractors knew was that they were dealing with HTA, the offers in both cases, right? That they were dealing with HTA, and in that process, it resulted in an award. Okay.
So you're saying that two contractors that were selected, they were unaware that Mike was involved.
No, I believe that they knew Mike was involved, and I know that they understood that once they filed a protest, level one of that review would be HOPA. And if either one was dissatisfied, it would move to DCCA. And if they were dissatisfied, either one at that level, the circuit court is where we could be in this process.
Except that's not what occurred.
What occurred?
Before it went to
Right.
DCCA, you pulled someone, either you or DBED pulled it.
Right.
And you started again. So they couldn't trust in that process because you kept pulling it back.
Which is my earlier, which is why we felt an up or down decision was important. And we didn't.
But how can the private sector have faith in the processes every time the outcome, when it goes through the process, the HOPA doesn't like the outcome, so he's going to just start from scratch every single time. I don't
agree.
get that.
I mean, I don't disagree with you on that.
But then going back to Senator Kim's point, but then you guys just kind of sat there and let him do that.
And I think it makes it even worse that you're asking us to instill the exemption. I mean, it's just like piling one thing on another. And I gotta say this, it doesn't mean doing the right thing is in the best interest of Hawaii about doing the right thing. It's making sure we're within the law, which is why we exist here today, is to have transparency within government and its process. I think that is the most hardest thing for us to swallow right now, is that here we had, just as if we're going to do a slap on the wrist, and we've had many inquiries about the selection process, not just on this, but on many other selections that you folks have made. So, I mean, what's the plan here? And it cannot be to turn on and tell us, oh, then instill the exemption back. I mean, that's just
No, take my comment
crazy.
in context here. You need to know, I appreciate the fact that that you're bidding this at this level. I am. Okay, and I think you were going to Senator Favela, but please know how much I appreciate this, because this is, I mean, basically, you're pointing out the flaws, and we've been operating under a review process that resulted into awards being rescinded, and we don't like it either.
Yeah, except there's so many points throughout the process, which Senator King brought up, that yourself, Kalani, the board could have said, hey, wait, we better check with the procurement officer. We better check with the attorney general, but seems like everyone was in collusion about this.
Yeah, I certainly didn't feel like we were colluding. I mean, I thought we were getting direction, and in the end, we didn't get the outcome we wanted in either case.
Well, you're not supposed to want an outcome. It's where whoever follows the law and whoever goes through the process correctly and gets the scores, then that's the outcome.
So, sorry.
Can I just add, the exemption wasn't just given to HTA back then willy-nilly. They had to earn that exemption.
Sure.
They jumped through all kinds of hoops before that exemption was given. So they earned it. So you're going to have to earn something like that. And you folks inherited on the grounds that you were following in that same footsteps along the way. Now, something happened along the way that caused this body to decide that you should no longer have that exemption. And it shouldn't be, it's going to be withdrawn just because somebody didn't like the outcome. Whether you win by half a point, 1/10 of a second, that if that first one was done correctly and that first one was valid, then that should have been, the protest should have gone in and it should have been gone through the whole process instead of being withdrawn. Again, if every time an entity feels that they don't like the choice of whatever the selection was made, that they're going to withdraw the procurement. And that's the problem with our procurement law right now, that they can do that at whatever whim. They can just withdraw after millions of dollars are spent on putting out these contracts. But as the person in charge, you folks are charged with having the judgment to look at these things. So you need to earn that. It doesn't just come because you had it and you lost it along the way.
If I could, members, I'd like to make a clarification, and John, I don't need to put words in your mouth, but the outcome that I was looking for as a result of both the first process and the second was a clean procurement run by the law under 103D and the associated Hawai'i administrative rules. The outcome I thought John was referring to was that we did that and were able to award a contract for our single largest US domestic market. That's the outcome we were looking for, not the offer that we wanted. So I want to make sure that nobody leaves this room today with the impression that that's what happened. Our outcome that we were seeking was a clean process through 103D and the associated HAR to award a contract for our single US market.
Then
So
why didn't you just do that?
was-
Why didn't you do that the first time?
Wasn't the first time, was it done cleanly? And in keeping with the law?
So I don't know which question to answer.
It's the same question.
Essentially, yes, we did everything with the guidance of,
Okay.
and again, this is the second point I'd like to make. At every step of the way, the procurement officer at HTA, the chief administrative officer, has the kuleana to do that under the law and with the guidance of our deputy AG Kinkley and others. Those folks were consulted at every step of this process.
So why-
My role as evaluation committee chair was to facilitate the meeting of the evaluation committee and its review before the publishing of both versions of the RFP, and then to facilitate the actual discussions and our deliberations as an evaluation committee, the oral presentations, et cetera. But the procurement authority rested with I don't know how to describe it, the other side of the HTA house, which is the admin function, right?
So the
But my
question-
subject matter
The
expertise.
question is, why was that draft letter upholding the award and denying the protest not sent, not made official?
I can't speak for Ronald Rodriguez.
And why was the information and the proposal from the winning bidder given at the briefing if you were in charge? If you folks followed everything, then how come those two things happened?
So Senator, I was not in charge of, I was not the procurement officer for any of these procurements. I was the evaluation committee chair. And I described-
Did you get the proposal when you went to the briefing with CHNA?
Did I give who the proposals?
CHNA?
I was not involved in the debriefing. I was not involved at that part.
Who was in charge of the
The
debriefing?
procurement officer.
Which was,
Ronald Rodriguez in the first and Keith, I believe. And then Mark, I don't know who had the second one.
okay,
Was you and
but whether you were in charge or not, you guys didn't follow the law. In both cases. In the case that you gave them the proposal without redacting, one, and two, that the decision of the procurement officer was not made official, somebody stopped it.
Senator, I appreciate the collective view, and I'm just trying to be clear about my role as the chief brand officer and evaluation committee chair and what I was involved and not involved with.
Chair.
I wanted to ask acting Chief Administrative Officer Mark Togashi to weigh in on Senator Payne's last.
No, we can come back to that. And this, you want?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. My name is Mark Togashi. I am the Vice President of Finance for Hawaii Tourism Authority and Acting Chief Administrative Officer. With respect to your question, Senator, on why proposals were released, my understanding, and again, I do not have firsthand knowledge, but my understanding.
You shouldn't be giving that information if you don't have first-hand knowledge.
I was not involved in the decision at the time, but my understanding on the reason for our submittal of the release of the proposals is that we followed the guidance that is under Hawaii Administrative Rules. HAR 3122-58, according to our understanding, requires that proposals of offers be released upon posting of the award. We followed that. We understand.
Including the scoring?
The proposals themselves.
Okay, what about the scoring?
The scoring is supposed to be.
I'd have to confirm that, but with respect to the proposals, which I believe was your senator's original question, I believe that we were working under the understanding that Hawaii Administrative Rules requires the sharing of proposals or the accessibility of proposals upon posting of the award.
But according to Bonnie, she said that if you anticipated a protest and so forth, that it had to be redacted or not given out. That's where you have to have some judgment on what's going on. And it was already in the debriefing that they handed out the proposal without redacting anything.
So on that HV's CD first being put in, between CHA with a protest, or if they never see the numbers that they were so close. This is what they're talking about the whole thing. We're not asking people to give us numbers from one quote from someplace. What we like more is if you guys never give them this information with CNHA thinking that they were so close by so much points, half a point, second of a point, whatever, but to put in a protest, right? Later on was retracted again, right? I've even listened to the procurement officer, right? Again, you guys talking about all you guys following you guys' rules, but your procurement chief officer told you guys, do not let the protest go through, right? And then you guys went to McCartney. It's the first bid, not the second one. Let's not get confused now. Talk about the first one. When the first one was protested, the procurement chief officer told you guys, no, we're not gonna go with the protests. We're gonna bypass them, right? And a lot of people make decisions thinking that they could fix one broken thing to make it even worse. Because you guys gave them information. You guys cannot tell you guys never. But they're gonna tell you, go talk to CNHA. They felt that the only was a little bit off. So if they could redo them, that's why they put in a protest.
But Rodriguez was the procurement officer at the time.
Correct.
And Rodriguez wrote the letter that they should honor the protest.
No.
No, actually, yeah, deny the protest.
Yeah, deny the
And
protest.
so at some point, somebody didn't like Rodriguez's letter and said, okay, we're going to start again.
No,
Okay, wait, you know what you're saying? I'm gonna tell you this right now. One thing I have is on great memory,
Yeah, I think
on
everyone.
great memory. I was just here, like it was yesterday. That's what would happen. You cannot be saying no. That's exactly what happened. McCartney stepped in from day one. You keep saying no. And the procurement chief said that we're not gonna honor the protest. Right? We're gonna go with what is this guy's called again over here? So much acronyms. HBCB, B, whatever, right? And then when the letter came in, he had a letter, he had documentation.
Rodriguez,
If you guys had documentation, and higher up came down and said, no,
yeah.
we're not gonna listen to him. We're not going. He had an actual letter that gave you guys and said his procurement law, that you guys all like quote, as the procurement law, because he was the procurement chief. So who in our role read the law and the procurement chief? That's what I like more, because if that's the case, that's where everything went wrong right there.
So the procurement officer made the award. Correct?
No, he wrote the letter to you guys, telling you
Rodriguez.
guys
Right.
not to take the protest for CNHA to award the contract.
And subsequently honored the award to HVCB. Okay, and at that point, with CNHA at some point filed a protest formally, and when that protest was filed, it
Rodriguez said deny the protest.
went to HOPA for review, and HOPA rescinded.
But that protest was never made official. That letter was never made official. It was a draft letter that got somehow ignored. We would have only know about it if we got a copy of the draft.
Yeah, and I'm not making an excuse other than to say that at that point in time,
What was the discussion to overrule Rodriguez and
Not send a letter,
yeah,
post the letter.
I don't recall. Well, I certainly didn't have a conversation to overrule it. The situation there was in perfect storm. It was complicated by the fact that he was departing on vacation, returned from vacation, and a day later had resigned completely, right? So I'm not suggesting that is a reason for this added mess, but in terms of actually overriding the procurement officer's feelings, once the protest came in and it moved to HOPA looked at it and decided to rescind again. As I recall from that letter, he also rescinded it, not in relation to the protest, but in the best interest of Hawaii.
but in your understanding, what would be the minimum requirements for the HOPA to say these things were not followed, we have to start again? Or was it just arbitrary? Or was it just because
Yeah,
that's what he wanted to do?
Yeah,
there has to be some kind of criteria? I can't imagine
sure.
anytime you don't like what happened, you're just gonna keep starting from scratch.
Sure, and I'm sorry, the director's not here, but let me say that in a conversation he had with me, he felt after having his people analyze the scores, that it was a statistical
His
tie.
people,
The HOPA, as HOPA, that
I don't understand.
it was a.
The HOPA had his people analyze the scores. Who are his people?
At DBED,
Okay,
right? And I think,
who
like, I cannot identify who exactly would have done it, but he had somebody help him analyze this, came back to us and said,
but why wouldn't you ask the procurement officer versus someone at DBED at that point?
See, the score is the score. The vote is the vote.
Right.
You win by 10 votes, they recount, you still won by 10 votes. I won by 29 votes, it was close. What, they don't like them, they can throw the election out? You're gonna, ask somebody gonna analyze it subjectively and then throw it out? Then a lot of us not gonna be sitting here. You know what I'm saying? It's like,
Yeah.
well, to me, and that should have raised the flag to you, to say, wait a minute.
John, for clarification, when you
Sure.
talk about HOPA, who are you specifically referring to?
specifically referring to former director, DBED Director Mike McCartney.
Thank you.
Yeah. I want to go back to some of the language that changed between RFP 1 and RFP 2. From what I understand, the State Procurement Office has standard qualification questions that were part of RFP 1. But when RFP 2 came out, those questions that surrounding failure to fulfill a government contract were taken out. So, the standard qualification questions ask about, as someone who's bidding, how many years of experience, how much marketing experience do you have? Name 5 major projects. And then the next list of questions, 3 of them go to, have you ever failed to deliver on a government contract? There are 3 questions that focused on that, which were not part of RFP 2. Who took that language out?
I mean, Mark, this is your wheelhouse, but I don't think those were taken out, sir.
They were taken out. Are the responses here? One, first initial response was in November 21, and then the second RFP's response came out on May of 22. And 3 questions with regard to failure to fulfill government contracts were deleted from the second RFP. Whose call was it to do that?
I do not know if it was in fact inconsistent.
Doesn't somebody review the second RFP before it goes out to make sure it's consistent?
I mean, who writes it then? Who wrote it?
It's a group effort. Ultimately, it's a branding contract, and the brand officer reviews it, and I don't recall that.
So I can't recall the attachment number off the top of my head for the standard qualifications questionnaire. I know that revisions were made surrounding things like the construction portion, questions about like equipment and stuff like that. But Mark, I'm not sure which attachment that was. But that's the only thing I can think of.
I know which form you're referring to. I believe I know which form you're referring to, Senator. I do not know the reason why it would be inconsistent if it was so the case.
Ultimately, who looks at the contract? Who's the last person who looks at the RFP before it gets issued? Because that's the person responsible, right? Who is that person?
Well, ultimately, I'm responsible for it.
So did you notice that there were 3 missing questions in
I did
RFP
not.
2?
I did not know that.
Who wrote the,
As with the procurement officer. Thank you.
who wrote the second RFP? And why was the number not changed? Why was it the same?
I can't speak to the numbering. I provided input and subject matter expertise in much of the scoping objectives, some of the tourism background. We give some, information regarding the market. Those things I provide, and then there are technical aspects of the procurement that run through the admin side of the house.
So on what basis did you feel that?
Well, you still
second-
didn't answer her question. Who wrote the RFP?
So I'm saying it's a collection of folks. Me and my staff provide certain sections, and Mark and his staff provide certain sections. Again,
Boom.
Mark is the procurement
So you're the
officer.
final drafter.
The procurement team that is headed by me sees the final part, correct, before it goes out.
So did you read it word for word?
Apparently not.
No, there's about 500 words that are different.
Did you read it in full?
I do not know at the time at what level it would. I'm sure that it was reviewed.
No, but did you read it? As the procurement officer,
Yes or no?
did you read it? Because every time the Monarchia bill came to me changing, I read every single word and I compared it. Did you do that? Did you or did you not?
My level of involvement at the time, I became more involved in this procurement in August.
Did you sign off on it?
No,
Who signs off on it?
our internal team, our procurement officer at the time.
I
It was
thought,
Rodriguez.
Who's that?
That was you said was you.
yeah,
Didn't you just say it was
I am the procurement officer now,
at the time you weren't the procurement?
so when did you take over?
in August of 22.
So I get what I'm just driving at, Mr. Chair, is after the first procurement and decided to withdraw and put in second procurement, what knowledge all of a sudden you guys had that you were going to put new language into this new procurement? That was made it so that you needed to withdraw it because it was so important for
But-
the interest of the best interest of the state of Hawaii.
But Rodriguez left when? When did Rodriguez
Ronald
leave?
resign?
December of 2021.
Okay, so you took over in August, so who was it between when Rodriguez left and you took over?
Keith Regan, I'm not sure if Keith is in the room, but Keith was still, Chief Administrative Officer. When he stepped down in August is when that procurement authority moved to Mark.
Okay, so which authorities do you have versus the HOPA? And how is that delineated?
Yeah, I understand, Chair, the question with respect to what responsibilities fall within HTA and what reside with the HOPA. I think that we've noted in the past or at the last briefing that our understanding is, although we have a procurement delegation, the specific sections or responsibilities that reside in a procurement are not detailed in the delegation form. So our understanding was that
So what's in the current delegation form
it is a general delegation
of all?
of responsibility. However, our understanding is that unless we are specifically delegated, or my understanding is unless we're specifically delegated a task, we are to work with the HOPA. That
Yeah,
is
but
why,
that's
that's why
kinda awkward because
sorry, if I could clarify that is why for very specific, for important tasks within the procurement, our understanding was we were to work with Mike McCartney, which includes things like development and approval of the evaluation
no,
committee,
and that's in writing.
review of the procurement itself. All these things prior to release, we went
Now,
back.
is that in writing? What you're spewing off now?
I do not know if.
Then
it's
how do
in-
you know that that's real?
That is the understanding in which we
Because
were working.
How do any of us know that's real? How do we know you're not making it up?
Understood. All I'm saying is, Chair, that is the understanding in which we were working under, and I believe that
Understanding,
Who told you that?
where'd you get that? understanding?
Let me, while Mark is gathering his thoughts, let me tell you what the procurement delegation to Mark effective August 3rd, 2022. Author notice and request for sole source, notice of amendment of sole source contract, emergency procurement request for extension of time on contracts, SPO price and vendor list contract purchases, exception, notice of and request for exemption from chapter 103D HRS, notice of amendment to exemption from chapter 103D HRS, record of procurement, restrictive specifications request, use of alternative procurement method, request to use purchasing card for block purchases,
So that's all delegated to.
all delegated to him. And a couple more, competitive sealed bidding, competitive sealed proposals.
Well, isn't that what
professional
this is though?
Competitive
Services.
sealed proposals.
So
So that's.
where, if that's the only document in writing that delegates procurement authority to you, how did the director take it back? Where is that in writing?
from I do not have it in writing. From my recollection, based on our conversations with HOPA at the time, our understanding is that HTA staff was going to work with the HOPA for approval on all of these significant milestones
But that's
within the
still-
RFP.
Yeah, but that's still verbal. I mean, the only legal document is the delegation document.
Yeah, I think point noted, and we will improve on that if that is the case.
I can speak a little bit, members, to some of the subject matter that was changed between the two versions. Part of it was an elapsed time frame, right? So the market moves generally quickly. We were also approaching the close of the calendar year. And so I was asked to basically redo and relook at the scope.
By
So if
whom?
you look at everybody, and also my own wanting to, because again, we were closing out at the end of the year. We knew their contract ended in December. And so if you look at the difference in the number of attachments between the first and second versions, you'll notice that the number of attachments significantly increased in the second iteration. That's because we included essentially a smaller portion for the remainder of calendar year 22. And then ask them for the same documentation, a brand marketing and management plan, budgets, performance measures, worksheets, et cetera, for the entire calendar 23. And then also we changed some of the language to clarify both the scoring criteria as well as the scope and the attachments and how they wrote up their plans.
So
And
if you know all
notice-
of that, if you know all of that, which that's great. Why don't you know what Senator Wakai asked you?
Which question, sorry?
What got
We
omitted?
Change the qualification questionnaire, because that's boilerplate standard. That usually doesn't change with the market.
So again, the standard standard qualifications questionnaire. I don't remember exactly what attachment. I do remember us discussing some of the construction related questions. We downloaded the template from the SPO website and used that in what was, I can't remember the exact attachment number in the second version.
But somebody made a decision to delete 3 questions that were pertinent to qualifying for this bid, for this RFP.
Yeah, and I need to go back because to your point, those questions about not completing work for other contracts, I think was what my recollection was that they were in there and they remained in there.
They were not in the
Okay.
RFP2, they were not.
Okay. I'd like to double check just to ensure, but yeah,
Is there a way you can do it right now?
I can grab my computer.
Go ahead.
Sure. So the state procurement office has decided to rescind the order of canceling the solicitation final bidding, or can the decision be reversed?
You're referring to the December 5 decision.
One we're just talking about now. One that, we're not talking about the one before, we're talking about the one seeing.
And can you repeat your question?
Question is, the state procurement office is DBED, decision to rescind the award of canceling the solicitation and the final bidding, or can it be reversed, the decision?
And the current decision by Mike McCartney on December 5 be reversed.
Because he rescinding another second procurement. Reason why I'm bringing this up, yeah,
Well, wait, real quick.
okay, go ahead.
Did he even have the authority to do that though? Because if the
Yeah.
only thing in writing is that document that says he's delegating all of the procurement authority to HTA.
Yeah.
Did he have the authority to go and cancel all of this? Because there's nothing in writing that gives him that authority,
According to,
It does.
according to Mr. Name, and Bonnie, he does.
but the delegation authority was
Yeah, but when
general.
it comes to.
Yeah, but on the
protest,
rescinding of it will fall under.
Well, that's what I'm asking. What agreement did the HOPA have with them in taking back some of that?
I think it's in the law that the chief
Yeah.
procurement overall officer has that. Yeah, has that.
Because they're saying at the last meeting, he could only be involved in the protest. But not necessarily rewrite the contracts, making sure that the scorings were released, making sure that the committees were involved. I mean, changing the makeup of the committees.
But in reviewing the protest, if you thought that there was some errors and stuff, then he has the authority to withdraw, which
But-
is law in our law.
But why did the HOPA at the time have the ability to change the contract or change the committee membership? Changing the committee membership is in his purview.
Not the committee membership, the rescinding of the
You can
contract.
recommend to them, it's
Yeah,
up to
rescinding
them
of
if they
the
will follow,
contract.
and they gave him all the authority to do that. They relinquished it. to him.
So repeat your question. I'm
No,
sorry.
I'm just going back to
Yeah.
what begins and ends with the HOPA and I guess your SPO.
And your question is whether,
Because it's very fluid. It seems like it just depends on the situation.
whether the December 5 letter has the power to
Yeah,
rescind?
he has the authority.
My understanding is he does, but you may want to get a different opinion. as
No,
well,
what did your AG say?
That it does,
Okay, then
then it is binding.
even though some of these other processes were not consistent with the law.
Processes like,
Passing out the scoring, changing the committee. I mean, weren't members, normally when you're going through the RP process and you're said you have the evaluation, it's just the evaluation committee. My understanding is that other members were also included in those meetings that were not supposed to be there.
you know, that did occur in the first RFP. But it occurred with the concurrence, I was one of the three people in that room. I would not have been there if I was not invited or permitted to be there by the procurement officer at the time. At the same time, I'm not questioning Ronald Rodriguez integrity, but I would have never been in that room. He had ultimate authority of the process.
So now you know you shouldn't be in them.
That's correct. Well, I think he checked on it later, as I understand it, with some colleagues and determined that that was not appropriate. But I was in there. I didn't have any scoring or direct influence over anybody, but I was there.
Okay, well, I'll just tell you my perception. My perception is you're going through a process, and what's happening is after the process, you figure, oh, we weren't supposed to do A, B, C. Then so you do the process again. Oh, we're not supposed to do C, D until you're gonna finally get this right 10 years from now. Versus what, I think if you were to check with the SPO and the AG, try to see what we can get right from the beginning.
Before we make the decisions. So what is the status of the HVCP protest now that DBED had rescinded the award to CNHA and the contract had been canceled? So what is the status now with HVCB? What is the status of their protest? I mean, I understand it was rescinded. What is the status? Everything just goes away?
We did receive that there is a protest from CNHA that followed the December 5 decision by Mike McCartney.
Okay, but the meeting with the governor was what? Was when?
November
30?
No. December 5.
I have, well,
No,
I got an email from Carol.
December 7. No, that's the meeting with the special meeting that Governor Green attended.
Yeah.
No, what is that? I'm talking about Governor Ige.
Oh,
There was a meeting on
November
Wednesday,
30.
November 30,
November
6:30
30.
PM. That was after the Senate hearing. So what occurred at that meeting? Because that's not public.
When we were here at the last hearing, you made a point which McCartney took under advisement that this matter should go back to the HTA board. He took your advisement seriously and asked the governor help to convene an executive session, which took place, at which time Director McCartney laid out his rationale behind moving toward rescinding and terminating the procurement. Basically what he had laid out here in the initial hearing, the last hearing that we had.
Yeah, no, I think the thought was more to delegate that decision to the board, not necessarily just inform them.
Then what I would, if you would hold that so until board chair can respond to that, because
So you were at the meeting
that's
as well.
important.
You
I
were,
was there as well.
and the board, the governor and the HOPA at the time had a collective decision to.
Yeah, there were no decisions made there. It was basically an information upload from Director McCartney. There was some discussion among board members that led to the calling of the December 7 special board meeting. And the agenda was laid out. There were requests by CNHA to defer on several agenda items that could have an impact on the status of their protest following the McCartney December 5 letter.
Senator Wakai.
Mr. DeFreeze, last week you had travel conference or tourism conference. And then the opening aloha reception was paid for by CNHA. How much did they pay for that opening reception?
Come on, help me with that.
They were a sponsor of the reception. I'd have to look at the exact dollar amount provided.
Why would you solicit money from CNHA when you have this very contentious situation that's right in front of you?
So I understand the sensitivity around that. I need to wrap my head around. I'm switching gears from the question you asked earlier about the questions and the standard qualification, but can I get back to you on that? I understand the question about the conference and the sponsorship and why you would do it.
So who solicited the sponsorship of CNHA?
Sponsorships were solicited on behalf of the Hawaii Tourism Authority by Pacific Rim Concepts.
And none of you on staff thought it would be improper to ask a potential contractor embroiled in this back and forth to pay for your tourism conference reception?
Again, Senator, I need to like switch gears in my head about that, and I need to come back because I need to recall how that all happened and our staff that went through that. Yes, the short answer is no, it shouldn't. We shouldn't have. Short answer.
So you're going to return the money to them?
Happy to.
And can you answer the previous
Yes.
question about why 3 questions were deleted from the?
I'm
second?
still trying to get clarity from you which 3. I see attachment number 4 was in the first iteration, and I think you're talking about the experience section of questions. And then in attachment 15 was the second round. All 7 questions are there, I believe. And so I'm trying to clarify which 3 you're referring to that didn't make between attachment 4 and attachment 15.
Okay, so in the first questionnaire, the
Mhm.
3 questions were,
How many years has your organization been? How many years of experience in destination brand? List the last 5 major projects.
okay, the question number 4 on
Yeah.
RFP 1 is, have you ever failed to complete any work awarded to you? Question number 5 was, has any offer or partner of your organization in the past 5 years been an officer or partner of some other organization that failed to complete a contract? And question number 6 was, has any officer or partner of your organization in the past 5 years failed to complete a contract handled in his own name? Those 3 questions that were in RFP 1 were not in RFP 2. And why is that?
I'm not sure where, well, again, I just downloaded these off the site. The 3 that I see is in what other lines of business are you financially interested, for what government agencies within the state of Hawaii?
Yeah,
No, I'm just,
and it goes on to ask all the other boilerplate questions, but these 3 specific questions.
and I'm seeing in attachment 4, the version I just downloaded, I don't see those questions you've just read either.
Yeah, but you're looking at number 2. RFP number
Nope,
2.
this is attachment 4 from round 1.
Yes.
The changes.
And then round 2 was attachment 15.
Okay, I don't know about attachments. All I have is the standard qualifications per question. I'll
Is that
forward
the-
it to you.
Thank you.
And-
I'm happy to follow up.
Fair enough.
Senator DeBoyd.
So who is in charge of the mediation process? Whose idea was the mediation process, I should say?
The mediation process was the idea of Director McCartney, who in turn, as part of the review process he was in as HOPA. He reached out to get a neutral mediator involved, and that brought forth the services of Judge Michael Broderick.
So I guess my question is, why did no one check that it was in line with the procurement process? Like, why did no one? ask-
That wasn't allowed.
Yeah, somebody should have checked.
My understanding from Deputy AG and HOPA was that it was within the HOPA's right to try and achieve a settlement to this dispute.
But you could only issue one RFP,
Yeah.
one contract.
Correct.
the way the
yeah.
RFP was written.
So,
Yeah.
so I guess I'm saying that there's so many opportunities, yeah. That any and each one of you on the HTA board also had to either ask the question, interject it, or ask for a second opinion. Why did that not happen any time along the way? I mean, it's just mind boggling with the amount and expertise I see on the board, yeah. And to try and look at going forward really leaves us to think that, do we have, without saying this, do we have a competent board in place to at any time interject something like this? Or do they know the rules of engagement? Trying to figure out such a vast amount of funds available while we try to move the tourism industry and marketing forward. You know, I cannot tell you how important that is to me to figure out who are we working with, and will there be a process for us to redeem ourselves, not as just a department, but as a government entity and agency on behalf of the state, you know? I mean, that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around right now.
Yes, your points are well taken, and I can tell you that my affirmations and clarifications were coming from Deputy Attorney General, and I understood that my understanding was that the HOPA, it was within his scope of responsibilities to try and achieve a settlement. The settlement that resulted is non-compliant with the RFP.
Wait, how did you come to that understanding?
Of the
You said my understanding was
Yeah.
that the HOPA had it within its scope to do the settlement agreement. So how did you come to that understanding?
after conferring with our Deputy AG.
And at what point did you realize that having to bifurcate that was not in keeping with the RFP? At what point?
When it resulted in I know that within the mediation process, there were genuine efforts to try and find a way to make the agreement comply with the RFP. And that may have meant that one of them could possibly be a subcontractor. And I think I later learned that wasn't going to work either. And so, you know, we ended up, the process ended up with a mediated settlement that didn't comply. And I think,
So who notified you that that mediated settlement did not comply? The same
the
deputy
HOPA.
AG?
No, the first time was the HOPA. Because he had exhausted all avenues to try and get it done.
So did you know in advance at all that they were going towards a bifurcated process? Or
Well-
settlement? Did you know in advance or early on that that's what they
You
were
know,
leading up to?
Yeah, I don't think any of us had a preconceived notion as to where that might end up, but that's where it ended up. And it ended up out of bounds.
Yeah, but that's my point. Why did you wait till you got out of bounds? Because I got wind of it before that was the idea. What do you
Yeah.
think about giving two contracts?
Yeah.
I said, I don't think you can do that.
Yeah.
And so I knew early on that was the goal,
Mhm.
and that was the wrong goal.
Yeah.
But somebody allowed that to continue. I didn't have the authority to stop it. But somebody should have stopped it before it got to that point.
So during this mediation that, Mike wouldn't call, and Senator, Kim is saying, HBCB, was asked, to have CNHA take the bid, and would you be able to work, with, CNHA? And the answer was no. So that's the reason why, and like Senator Kim said, before the mediation even went, that was the proposal that we was hearing. That if they couldn't combine and let the procurement go through, CNHA get the bid, have, let's go to HVCB, work with them so that the RSP can go through, because again, you know, we want to the best interest of the people of Hawaii, right? But apparently it wasn't. It was the best interest about the money. So that's the reason why I have a problem with this whole mediation. Because going into the mediation, they was gonna separate them. And you know already, if you separate them, you'd have to have two different contracts, two different bidding, right? So already right there was flawed. So already was sunken ship. Bottom line again, I will say this again very clearly. It had nothing to do about the people of Hawaii and doing the right thing for the people of Hawaii. It was about the money and who wanted the money. Because one group wanted to work with the other group and the other group said no. So that's why Mike came up with this whole separating them. One get more experience, one no more experience, all of this stuff. But when these guys came 150 years ago and still here because the process was different, never had procurement, never had bid. Year after year after year, they got the contract. Now there's a flaw. Now there's a protest. Ask them to work around this bidding thing and never happened. So just where we are, I don't like to hear no more already how important this is for the people of Hawaii. Because if it was, the people that had this thing for 150 years, yeah, their business would change their mind because they would think the people of Hawaii is first. But it's not. It's about the money. Because if it wasn't about the money, they would have went, but they didn't. And the reason why Mike did this thing, he knew he couldn't separate them. Because had other people in this room told him he couldn't separate them. But he still went. Why? Because he knew he did this, and later on, he would do the same thing he just did. Through the contract. And this is not fair. This is the reason why I get two more questions for you guys. Because now you're going to have a third bid going out. Like everybody and their cousin know about both. All three contracts, three bids, numbers or whatever.
So what's your second question?
The second question is, in additional steps needed to be taken to bring disclosure with HVCB and or CNHS protest, when would the contract be resolicited for the third time? What necessary steps need to be taken to clarify HDA and DBED's procurement roles in the new solicitation?
Sorry, I was still comparing documents, Senator. So I missed the front part of the question, Senator. Sorry.
What additional steps will be taken to bring closure to the HVCBs and or CNHA protest? And when is the contract is going to be resolicited for the third time, if necessary, with the steps to be taken to clarify HDA or DBED's procurement role in the whole solicitation?
So I'm not the chief administrative officer, nor do I oversee the procurement function of the authority. The board also
Okay,
has
so
not.
just whoever is, you let them.
Yeah, and I'm just saying, we also haven't spoken to our board either, so.
Yeah, but that didn't seem to matter before, so.
Well, let me say that the new RFPs, two considerations, right? Two RFPs.
If you don't know, you can say you don't know.
No, or one RFP with multiple awards, right? I'm just,
No.
so I'm not worried
So
about
he's
that.
asking, what steps are you gonna take? When is it coming out?
It is coming out, the goal, let's work backwards. The goal is to get the award prior to March 31, when the current HVCB contract extension expires.
Yeah, but you guys said you've learned a lot.
Correct.
I mean, so what steps I mean, I think at this point we've exhausted it, but you need to come back to us. What specific steps are you taking to remedy all of this in regards to who's going to have decision making? Who's going to be, it can't just keep going whenever they want.
Here's what I've learned. Number one, I now, as the president CEO, need to become qualified and certified as the SPO for HTA. Number one.
Before the third contract?
Before the third contract, okay? So that my primary contact throughout this whole thing is not just the AG, but directly with the SPO. And then internal to HTA, I will subdelegate accordingly, but I need to take full responsibility for it at the agency.
Sure. You know what the thing is about this to March, yeah?
Wait, third question,
Yeah,
question.
Yeah, last one. So the reason why I'm saying this, so you guys will come back to legislation for additional funding for the third solicitation, because now the money is gonna be depleted and is being used all the way up to March. So when the contract was supposed to go to bid was a certain number. So are you gonna come back to us and say, hey, this money was used, now we need this number to be put back in so that they can put out the bid? Is that gonna be?
No, they don't have any general funds.
Yeah.
They're still using
Yeah.
ARPA.
We're
And they
in
have till
ARPA,
twenty
yeah,
twenty-six, I think.
at the moment.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
You know,
you, Chair.
so I looked at attachment 15 and attachment 6.
I think it was 4 in the first round.
So attachment 6 is the
Did I get
first
my
one,
number wrong?
and attachment 6. So whatever question number 7
Hmm.
is question number 4 on attachment 15. So there it is missing.
So the list of experience of principal individuals is your number 7?
Yeah, so here, number 7 is in what lines of business are you financially interested in?
Okay.
That's number 7. But then on attachment 15, that same question is number 4.
Can we check offline after? Because my number 4 is in what other lines of business are you
Okay.
financially interested?
Okay,
in? So I just want to make sure we're pulling from the same source.
okay.
I
just pull
downloaded
offline.
from hands. so-
Okay. Okay, why don't we hear from? Okay. From the board.
Hello, Chair and Senators, George Camp, Board Chair, along with Mike White, Vice Chair.
Hello, Chair and members, Mike White, Vice Chair of HTA.
So if you can just
Board.
explain your role in the rescinding.
We had no role in that. They asked us for information, but that decision was basically on the HOPA.
Who is they and who is us?
Us as the board had no role on the decision on the rescinding of the contract. And HOPA was the one who solely decided, but we were asked for information at time that we try to provide and cooperate with them.
So the HOPA asked the board.
No, asked me as the board chair, but those decisions was made by the HOPA, not the board. Board had no involvement in the decision by HOPA.
Okay, so what was the meeting with the governor then that he talked about on November 30th?
The governor was basically to inform them of what he was planning on doing and what he discussed here. We just thought it was important, given that we met with the Senate and out of your request that we met with the board too, but no decisions were made at that board meeting. I mean, at that special meeting with the governor.
Okay, so all the HOPA said was, I'm gonna do this. Too
No.
bad, so sad.
No, he didn't say he's gonna do this. He said this is a thought process. These are the things that he's basically what he shared with all of you. And he was open for questions from all the board members. And we just discussed openly about the reasons why and why he thought and why he was thinking about doing what he's gonna do. But he didn't say he was or isn't. He basically shared what we heard here.
So did any board members ask questions?
Yes, quite a few questions from all the board members.
Did you have conversation? Was there consensus?
Yeah, I don't know if there's consensus, but there was lots of conversations and I think more informative.
And how long did the meeting last?
I think almost 2 hours.
George, so did any of the board members raise concerns regarding starting all over again and withdrawing the contract?
Yeah, I guess people had concerns, and then after him explaining why he was doing what he did, I think the overall consensus was we understood of why, we couldn't go forward with the current situation that we were in.
So you folks agreed that it shouldn't go forward.
We didn't agree or disagree. We just discussed, and that's why we were gonna bring it to the board at that next board meeting on December 7th. On Thursday, but out of respect of a request, we withheld that, so that decision will be made on December 22nd and our next board meeting, it'll be agendized.
So on the 7th, you guys didn't make a decision.
Agenda, but out of request from, the public actually was CNHA requested if we could withhold some of the decisions that was on the agenda.
Why?
And because they wanted just a little more time on that, and we checked with SBO if that would withhold us from proceeding on some of the things that we had, and we were okay with that. So then we agreed as a board that we would defer that decision until December 22nd.
Wait, so does that mean that the board is gonna take oversight of the third round?
Well, the,
Because you're saying you're checking with the SPO, so if it's still with the HOPA,
well, HOPA's role is to rescind or not rescind. And then he basically rescind, on December 5th. The board's role is, given that the contract's rescinded, what pathway forward do we do? Whether it's a single RFP, 2 RFPs, multiple, so those things need to be discussed by the board, and that's for the board to decide.
so how do you reconcile that? If the board can keep issuing contracts and if the HOPA doesn't like it at the end, or issuing RFPs, if the HOPA doesn't like it at the end, they can keep rescinding. I mean, we could do this forever.
Yeah, and hopefully we don't, but that is the process from our understanding from SPO, under the procurement. This is new to us, but from our understanding, that is the process, and we consistently asked AG, SPO, and our procurement officer to make sure we're complying and doing the right thing, and from our understanding, that is what we're doing, from that ruling. And our role is basically, if rescinded, then what is our decision moving forward?
So I want to follow.
Yeah.
Can I follow? So did you folks do the same process for when the first one was rescinded? Did your board opine on it?
Yeah, we basically, once it's rescinded, we told the board and we needed to go out to RFP again.
And the board agreed?
Yeah, yes.
They voted on it.
Not if we voted, but we definitely discussed it. I can go check if we voted. It was over a year ago now. But it was definitely the process that we needed to, if it's rescinded, then we needed to go out to RFP again.
And those discussions happened at a meeting?
Yeah, I believe so. I gotta go double check. Like I said, it's over a year ago. But everything we try to do transparent from that end. Now, things that weren't discussed are things that was under the, under the RFP where we couldn't discuss because it was confidential still yet. But the decision to go out to RFP again was discussed, to my knowledge.
Senator Noy.
Thank you. Thank you for being here as well. The issue with HOPA, you won't have another HOPA because you have a new administration. And HOPA was derived from the past director of DBED. He himself created to take over the procurement. And so it depends what the new administration
Yeah, so
wants to
we
do.
can ask him when he comes up, how
Exactly.
he's gonna.
Yeah, so I think we'll wait for him to answer and address that. And then we'll follow based on what the DBED director and the direction we got from our end.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah, so for you guys board, besides having just these discussions and not recollection if you took a vote or not, or just having a polite discussion, what does the board actually do? And if you guys are not taking any action, because these two procurement, these two right here, you guys should have took some kind of action. Whether you guys agree or disagree, it's a yes or no. Not, I don't recall, because a year ago, we had a discussion, but we never really take a stand. We were just talking story. No, board's supposed to take a stand whether I support him or I don't support him. How much is the count? 5-1, 6-1? We need to know. Because what if it was a close vote? Maybe we can go and protest that and have a revote. I mean, you see what I'm saying? You're not giving us answers as a board. Okay, so if you guys are on the board, if you guys are delegated or whatever you get position with the board, you guys need to make one stand. It seems like twice you guys didn't make a stand. You guys let OMPA come in, talk to you guys. It was a nice discussion. Chair asking you, did you guys take a stand? Well, we never necessarily take a stand. We didn't take a vote. Then what is your guys' process? I need to know, because we like know if you guys said to him, 6 guys said, yeah, I mean, I don't know how much guys on the board. 3 guys said no. We need to know that, but it seems like you guys, it wasn't an urgency, right? Because it's such an urgency to do this for the Hawaii people, but it wasn't an urgency to take a vote. Mr. McCartney, I know you OMPA, DBED, whatever, yeah? We don't agree with some of the things. Oh, no, maybe you agree, you don't agree. We don't have that numbers. How we would know if it was a unified decision on the board for both? Because you said you don't recollect, because it was a year ago, What about the second one? Do you recollect if you guys took a stand as a board? Did you guys vote and agree with him on the decisions that he made? Was it 3-1? What was the number?
Yeah, I mean, you're correct. I don't know the number and I don't know if we did take a vote on that. You know, and we will take a vote on the 22nd in what pathway we're going forward.
Okay, so you guys have anybody that take minutes for you guys?
Yeah, I can go look to see on there, but
To also, you
yeah,
know.
that's what I didn't want to speak out of turn if I didn't know exactly. And that's what I said. It wasn't willy-nilly or I was
Yeah.
making it up, you know, but it was very public that we're doing this RFP. And it was very public that was rescinded. It was very public that we needed to do it again. If there was an exact vote, I don't recall, and I didn't want to misspeak. And that's why I said those comments.
But on the second RFP, it's only getting rescinded
Yes,
now, right? So
we just
but-
found out they got rescinded.
but you were quoted in the settlement press release.
No, I was not.
Yes, you were. It was,
Yeah.
that's when the governor and Mike announced that there was gonna be a path forward, they're gonna try to find a way.
Yeah, I was not quoted in there.
Okay, I'll pull it up.
Yeah.
The same one that I read from the last time.
You're talking about the one that CNHA and HVCB and John
Yeah,
DeFreeze had a quote.
So he spoke on your behalf,
Spoke on my behalf.
the John.
Oh, he did not.
So
speak on my
wasn't
behalf.
even involved with the settlement.
No, no. No, this was a proposed settlement that was announced in a press release for an extension of 6 months for the HVCB contract for the market. It wasn't a finalized settlement, and it wasn't until the
It
next.
was, it said that there was 3 parties that agreed, and even though there were supposed to be only 2. And I had asked CNHA, why did you agree to it? You're not even a party to it. And he said it was under duress because
Right.
they wanted.
Yeah, and I can have him clarify that, but it wasn't the agreement on him being under duress. He was actually not originally included in the press release because the release was about an extension of the HVCB contract for 6 months because of the market. Now, Kuhilo asked us if it could be part of the release to show that we're working in good faith together to find a possible solution and pathway forward. And that's why there were quotes from CNHA. Kuhilo was-
So if you weren't involved, then, but yet you're telling me he asked us, which means that
No,
includes you.
Like I told you, at that time, I was in the mediation, but I didn't give a quote. You asked me if I gave a quote in my news article.
So, but you were part of the mediation,
I was asked to be included in the mediation
but the board didn't have any say on the meeting.
because it was an ongoing mediation that wasn't ready for the president because we haven't even did anything and we saved it to the next board meeting. And that's when we explained of what that was.
So-
Because I believe that this release came out in October.
So the board doesn't have to be part of.
This was an ongoing mediation, Judge Broderick, and the board was not included in the mediation. It's about a possible pathway forward.
Yeah, I'm just going back to Senator Vavella's point where all these actions are taken by the HOPA without any board input,
Yes,
even though a few of you are selectively being included.
yes, because we're in a procurement process. So under that, it was confidential and it wasn't to be shared with the board. You know, even who was on there and everything else.
Okay, so the board finds out about it from the press release too.
No, the board found that statement from the press release. And then we didn't announce it to the board of what we were talking about until the next board meeting. And
By then it's in the paper.
yeah, but we didn't settle on anything. It was just a potential pathway forward that we were sharing. And really, the press release was about the extension of 6 months. And what we did decide on whether we're going to put a special board meeting to discuss that. But at that time, we said we can hold off to the next board meeting because it didn't warrant a special board meeting just to say something that's being discussed that's public, but there was no decision. And all throughout, we said that final decision needed to go to all 3 boards in order for it to be something that we can move forward. So we're still way ahead of it. We needed, well, the board of CNHA needed to agree, the board of HVCB needed to agree, and then finally HTA's board needed to agree on what the potential settlement would be. And more importantly, we needed to ensure that SBO would be agreeing to the pathway forward. And at that time, we did not have any of that. So we thought it was premature to be discussing any of that at that time to call a special meeting.
Okay, but going back to Senator Kim's point, you guys did not know or checked with the SPO if a settlement with two contracts was allowed.
We're in discussions with the SBO and our AG throughout the whole process. And we're looking at a viable option for settlement on a pathway forward. You know, so it wasn't,
Did you know at the time that you couldn't have two separate contracts
no, it,
with one RFP?
like I almost know that those things are highly unlikely, but we didn't know absolutely if we couldn't. And we thought it was important that if we could find in the best interest of the state sincerely and not being, you know, think that if the two had an agreement that they could both agree upon, first get them to agree upon that and then see if we can find a legal pathway forward. And that was the process that took a lengthy amount of time and had SBO involved, had AGs, multiple AGs involved. And it wasn't until that Tuesday that we had all of them together. And then that's when they gave the ruling that to their legal counsel, their advice would be that this wouldn't be a pathway forward. And that's why Mike McCartney that was going to share it with you guys was thinking about, okay, then we have to rescind it and start all over again.
Okay, but what if you have no idea if the majority of the board or even some members of the board agreed to even having a settlement agreement?
No, the board wasn't involved because we were still in the procurement process.
Yeah, and I'm saying is, at that point, you didn't know because it seems like you're not talking to anybody.
We were in a procurement process, so we couldn't talk to any of the board members about any of this. That was the reason. It wasn't why I didn't want to talk. And that's why as soon as we could, then we
So
shared it.
what
in
if the board says,
executive
hey, we don't agree with even going through the process of a settlement agreement?
session. Yeah, I mean, you know, unfortunately, you know, yeah. They wouldn't know until we bring a meeting where we had the board vote. You know, but that was the reason. It wasn't to keep it secret. We're trying to be compliant to what's.
So why didn't you feel the need to call an emergency meeting before the settlement, of even taking that process?
We
Going down
thought
that path?
about doing that, but we just found out that there's a pathway and we know if we didn't have a legal pathway forward, we didn't want to bring something to the board that wasn't even close to being compliant. You know, and that was the decision that we made to hold from holding an executive.
What I'm suggesting is, why not check with the board before you enter this settlement mediation? What if they didn't agree going down that path?
Right, well, you know, I chose not to at that time, but that settlement was been in the works for months. You know, and we didn't even know what the settlement would end up.
But it was announced on the 5th.
No, it was announced on the 5th, so because we had a press release to extend the USA HVCB contract. And all the announcement was is that we had an agreement. And we needed to make sure it was compliant. You know, it wasn't saying that this is final and it was approved
So
and all of it.
the extension of the
That was
HVCC,
important. Yes.
that was unilaterally decided by HOPA with no input from the board.
No, the board decided. That was our decision because we had an extension because the contract would expire.
And you voted on that way.
Yeah, I don't know exactly, probably that meeting before, you know, but those, I don't know if that was a vote, but I also know like this past one.
Wait, sorry. You don't know if extending the HVC contract was a vote?
Yeah, I don't know right now if it was a vote or not, just to be clear. You
Okay,
know,
so
but this is what we're gonna do at this other meeting, because it's gonna come up again, is the vote again to extend
if
these.
there's no vote and the contract was extended, whose authority was it? Who had the authority to extend the contract?
It would probably be the procurement officer for HTA working directly with the SBO for the approval. Because SBO needs to approve any extension that we have,
Okay, even without board approval.
even without board approval.
So you can extend any contract without board approval.
I think it's situational depending on SBO, but I'll double check with our people here, but that was my understanding. If it wasn't voted on, that's my understanding is because we're running up to a deadline and that we needed to extend. But usually, and that's why I don't want to say I did or not, usually we always ask the board, you know, for an extension for their approval. So I don't know if this was exact.
The HTA rules stipulate that there is no board approval for any contracts below $250,000. If it's above 250, there has to be board approval.
Okay, so I'll double check if we did that. Thank you.
Sure.
Clarify. Yes,
So you're the chair for
yeah,
HTA, right?
I'm the chair.
Who did you represent in the mediation process?
HTA. I was actually asked to be a part because John DeFries was in Japan at the time. So I just sat in there with Kalani and the two other parties.
So you represented HTA.
HTA.
Thank you. So
Yeah, so when the bid came out and I think it was awarded to CNHA, the procurement wasn't done already then? So when you went into this mediation, you guys still was in procurement?
That's what they say is that as long as it's ongoing, we're still in, so all the ones on the selection committee, we can't speak on behalf because we're still in procurement because of the protest.
Kalani, since you have your computer, can you look up the last two board approvals on the extension of the HVCB contract
Thank you.
to see if the board actually,
And if it did, it would have came from Kalani for the ask.
the board voted on it? Yeah, you can.
Yeah, thank you.
We, as you know, we had 3 extensions. First extension for the period January through June 22. The brand management marketing plan for that period was presented at our January board meeting and approved unanimously by our board of directors.
No, but I'm talking about the extension of the HVCB contract.
Did we vote on the extension for the brand management plan for the USA contract?
The brand management marketing plans is for that extension period of January through June. The July.
So it's not a separate vote on the extension.
That's the 6 months.
Yes. The plan is I don't understand. So you have you're voting on a marketing plan, but what I'm asking is if you voted on extending the contract.
We did, to my knowledge, we did not vote on extending the contract. We made the board aware that the contract was extended. And at the time, we asked for the board's approval of the brand management marketing plan for the
Okay,
period.
but not specifically the extension of the HVCB contract.
Correct.
Okay, so how many times did you extend the contract explicitly without the board's explicit approval by vote?
There were 3 contract extensions. The first one I just described, which
Okay,
is
so that one
January
didn't
through
have,
June.
okay, the
The
second one.
second one was from July through September of 22. Again, we provided an update to the board of the BMM, the brand management marketing plan, at the July board meeting for that July through September period. And then third,
So
was-
that again, the extension was not explicit.
Well, I think the first thing to clarify on all of this is that the HTA staff has sought and obtained approval of a budget in which we operate from, which is funding all of these contracts. So the board has approved an intention to be able to expend funds toward the US MMA. That in concert with the presentation of the MMPs, we felt was sufficient.
So then why even put any contract in front of them if you're saying that it's all bulked by doing a plan?
Could you repeat your question or clarify your question?
Okay,
for me,
you're
Chair?
either saying by approving a plan, you're essentially approving all the extensions, all the contracts. But then it's not consistent. Sometimes they approve contracts, sometimes they approve extensions, sometimes they don't. And when they don't, you're saying, oh, but they voted on the plan.
What I am saying, Chair, is to clarify, our board approved a budget that we are.
That's not what I asked, though. I asked about explicit extension of the contract, not the budget, not a plan, the extension of the contract.
My understanding is that the approval of the budget enables staff the ability to, through our president and CEO, the ability to execute contracts. We made the board aware that we extended these contracts. In addition to that, in concert with that, we also presented the brand management and marketing plan in support of that.
So is that your understanding? Every time you approve a budget that they can just extend the plan? They can extend the contract?
No, my recollection was we were presented the extension for the September period at a board meeting.
That's what I thought, but it doesn't sound like that.
But there was no actual vote on that, Mr. White, correct?
Yeah.
There's
Sure.
one thing to have an appropriated amount of money for Japan, US mainland or whatever. It's an entirely different set of circumstances in which you sign off to say, we as the board put our stamp of approval on this new USA marketing contract. It doesn't sound like that took place.
Yeah, it sounds from what you described, that vote did not take place from understanding unless Kalani would know different because I wouldn't come into branding.
Right, so that's a violation of your own rules. And so is it legal that you guys have extended it 3 times without board approval?
I don't know that answer to the question, but hopefully the AG, you can ask them that too. Kalani?
There's perhaps some nuance, and I don't know if it helps or not. When we present the brand marketing plans to the board, it's so that they have express knowledge over what the contractor will be doing. They don't necessarily say, we vote to extend contract 17029 S19 by 6 months, but they were presented the brand marketing plan for that period. So again, I don't know if that helps or not, but there's no like agendized item to the specificity of the contract and the time, but they did see the work plan that was produced in conjunction with that extension.
It's not right.
Okay, I'm a little confused. So are you saying that they just put in front of, you guys just put in front of the board what the plan is and that it's assumed that the board has approved? You're not asking, I mean, the agenda should, no, let me finish, please. I assume that on the agenda, it should say for board approval,
Yes, for the brand marketing plan, yes.
but you just said that they didn't approve it.
They don't approve language that says extension.
It's different things though.
Again, that's the nuance I was trying to get at, and I wasn't sure if that was gonna make this worse or not. But like I said, they do review the plan of the activities that are associated with the
Right.
extension.
But
So,
there should be a vote taken.
And there was a vote taken on the plan.
so is the contract encompasses the plan?
Does the contract, it's the other way around, the plan gets attached to the supplemental contract.
Right, but the contract's supposed to be voted upon. Because in event that there's a delay in the budget, which you authorize the money, now the contract,
Is on hold.
hey, you need to extend, there need to be a vote on that contract extension. I mean, why do you have a contract with dates on if the board's not gonna approve it?
That I have. Stay. We did have that on the agenda to vote, and it's also going to be on the next agenda to vote. On the list, my mistake, because I'm the board, but that was not included in terms of what you're saying about an actual vote, and that was,
Okay, so we just have to hear from the AG if those two extensions were legal.
yes.
So why would you, so you know my problem, there's a lot of mistakes.
Senator Kidan.
George, can you just clarify? When this discussion was held at your board meeting, were you guys aware that you were voting for an extension?
At this one coming up.
No, previously.
Previously.
No, sorry, I don't think we, from my understanding, yes, I felt, but that's just my understanding. We did not take a vote. And like I said, on this next one for sure, and then when I had this Thursday, it's definitely agendized for an extension of vote. My assumption was that we did have that, but what they're saying is we did not have the vote on the extension.
But would your minutes reflect that you voted on this?
Yeah, if I did, but it sounds like we didn't even have it on the agenda to vote on the extension. I know in the minutes that we would have had this past one, it was on the agenda. We just deferred it to this 22nd, which is basically to ask for all these extensions again. So throughout, since procurement changed on us, there have been numerous extensions, and that's why I thought we were doing that, but it seems like, it was overlooked on our part.
Extension is nothing to do with.
No, what I'm saying is the process of
But
extensions.
it's in your rules. It's
Yeah,
in your
so what happens is, I thought we were compliant to the rules, and obviously, if we didn't do that and we didn't vote, then we weren't.
Who does your agendas? Who does the agendas?
I do, and he does it.
Okay.
I play a role in that as well.
One that recommends.
Yes, it's on what?
Double check to make sure you guys
Yes.
are complying.
Yes.
And the fact that they didn't do it. They
Yeah,
didn't.
that's what I want him to explain.
Members, if I could please clarify, I would like to reiterate that we typically do not go to the board for every contract to execute every single contract, regardless of threshold. Again,
But this is the largest contract, the biggest contract with the most money.
what I am referring to is that we go to the board for a budget, to approve a budget, upon which we have the authorization to go ahead and execute contracts. We did apprise the board, and we kept the board apprised throughout this process.
Okay, but there's a problem here, and I think, Chair, you need to correct this problem, because staff should not think that just because you give them a budget, they have the right to do the contract. That is not their responsibility. They don't have that ability. And if they're not letting you know that, and if your attorney is not letting you know that, then something is wrong with this whole process. And maybe we shouldn't even have HTA. I mean, we're wrong.
So what if we never have the budget? Or we never have one budget?
We have budgets, but we don't do the contract.
Okay, wait. Senator Tigwait and then Senator Gonzalez.
So,
Yes, Chair.
as the chair,
Mhm.
sometimes you just cannot take people's words for it.
Sure.
And really, that's what's happening. And now I know why the budget got stripped last year, which, these are things that, we really gotta pay attention to. You trusting them to do your stuff. When you gotta turn on and you gotta double check what they're doing, check with your guys' AG, because we're not even supposed to be here today right now. We're holding up all these contracts and then they're telling you what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to tell them what you want to be done.
No, point taken. Thank you.
And there's way too many mistakes going on here. Whether or not you guys get new incoming board members, I would expect that you guys get one class in what your responsibilities are to whether it be the budget, the people that you guys are serving on the tourism industry. It's so hard to now look forward and say, hey, do I trust you guys and what you guys gonna bring forward? Or do I now spend more time figuring out if you understand what you guys doing? I mean, you guys get a threshold of 250,000, what you guys can get away with. And now you're trying to tell me, no, it's whatever. It's not whatever. Do your guys' homework. Do it. I said, this is so sad that we're sitting here. Because I can tell you right now, I did have a conversation with the procurement officer. And I said, I don't agree with half the stuff you guys telling me right now, because half the answers is, and you guys can't even answer the questions directly. So I mean, come on, let's get it together. Let's answer the questions and let's not evade the question. Simple yes or no, not maybe, well, give me a chance to explain. Explaining is doing time when you guys have your meetings. And to come up with a solution that best fits those proposals that were brought forward. Thank you, Chair. Another question. I just had.
So going back to that, then our understanding is the rules are any contract below 250. The chair can sign along with the executive director. Anything above 250 needs the board approval. So if Mark's logic is correct, as long as it's in the plan, you don't even need your signature. So that's where it's inconsistent.
By major marketing contracts.
Well, if I could just add something, I think in particular, when we're extending, that is clearly an additional expense that, in my view, couldn't be covered by the budget. So you're, to Senator Kim's point, that any extension should not be just considered an extension of the
No, I agree.
existing contract. It should be viewed as a new expenditure.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I think pardon?
Why didn't you say something all this time?
Well, because
He was on that board at that time, and he was on the agenda we have it now, like I said, the December 7th agenda. He's just appointed to, we did put on the agenda is all the extensions that we're requesting from the board.
to me, there's no question that any extension should have board approval. And if you don't mind, I'd like to go back to a comment that Senator Favela made regarding us taking a vote on the award. My understanding is that the award was not within our purview as a board because of the protest. So it had to remain with the HOPA, and it was not a decision that the board had input on. And my understanding is under the previous setup where we had the waiver, this whole process would have been resolved either by the CEO, if the CEO made a decision that the parties were not in agreement with, it would come to the board and the board's decision would be final. So I hope that clarifies.
Yeah, the problem I have is that, okay, here we go again on the first procurement process. Procurement office, sir, said, we're not gonna take the protest. Okay? Now, did it go to the board? It went straight to Mike McCartney? How did the process go bypass you guys? That he decided he wasn't gonna listen to the procurement officer. So now, when and where does this come, you guys come involved, as you guys asked the AG, or as anybody else before you going to make? That's what I'm saying, so yeah, maybe you misunderstood me, in the sense of going to, what the procurement officer's recommendation was, is you guys take a stand and say, you know what? We're gonna stay with the procurement officer, or we're just gonna let Nick overrule you guys?
Yeah, I'm just referring to the second.
Yeah.
Process, because
It's asking you when you guys get a chance to take a vote on the decision that Mike is making, bypassing the guys who put in the procurement. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah. I don't believe we have.
On that process, because there's a big context that's not there. You know, when the first one that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And the procurement officer, you know, in the middle of the final of it before, you know, we ended in there on December 5th. He sent in his resignation letter. Now, he was still employed with us until December 30th, but he was going to go on vacation from December 23rd to 29th. So at that time, his responsibilities were taken away and given to Keith Reagan, who then couldn't do it at that time because of the amount of work. And then so Mike McCartney, the HOPA, took on that responsibility. So that draft letter that you saw in there was never discussed or talked about, you know, in terms of his personal decision on how he ruled based on the information he had. And that's where it went. And that was a confusion that people had of how did Mike McCartney, the HOPA, get involved in the final decision. And during that time, when the first complaint, you know, was there from CNHA, then the HOPA was doing his due diligence throughout that whole time. And then that's when he decided to rescind the contract. So there's some timing involved. And then after we finished the first RFP that got rescinded, Mike McCarthy delegated back to the new chief procurement officer, which would be Keith Reagan at that time. And as we're going and finishing up, then Keith Reagan resigned, and that's how Mike inherited it again.
But that's not in writing though,
No, it should be in writing.
where Mike delegates it back to Keith.
It should be. It should be. You
Okay,
know,
we asked for that, but we didn't
yeah,
get
it
it.
might be under attorney-client privileges, but that thing is what they signed to. You know,
When you said Rodriguez, some personal, that draft that he wrote.
yes,
To uphold the protest, to award the contract.
the first one.
That wasn't personal. He was doing it on behalf of.
No, but that draft was never set,
Right.
is what I'm saying. And
Why
then
not? That's the question we want to know.
because he was going on vacation and he didn't want the decision to lie solely on him. It was a draft. And it's best to go ask him, but it was a draft that was proposed. It wasn't something we decided on. And then
But they were-
he was leaving because he was going on vacation, even though he was coming back,
But
and he thought it was better for him to step.
that was his decision. The letter was a draft, but it was his decision at that time that they were not uphold the procurement,
Right, I understand.
And that's on behalf of HDA and all of his work. And as the procurement officer, he was the one most knowledgeable of the whole process, right?
Well, he had information of the whole
He
process,
had that
right?
power at that point,
Well, I don't think he had ultimate power, but
but he had the power at that point.
as a procurement officer.
Say whether or not the HOPA was going to uphold his letter or not, uphold his decision, that's another issue.
Right.
Okay, I'm not sure why, but your rules are not online.
Yep.
Your HTA rules. You know why? Yeah.
We have it on. Very sure that's first down.
But the public can't see it.
Yes, I believe that we have not made it public.
Because
I don't think that there's. I don't think that.
Well, we should make it public. Yeah, we have nothing to hide. Yeah. Yeah.
Any other questions for board members?
I don't know this part, maybe you the answer, but, who selects the board? You guys board? How's you guys board selected?
The go.
Well, my first selection was nominated by President of the Senate, Donna McConnell Kim. You know, and then.
So is the Senate then?
You guys confirm.
She feels about that now.
You guys confirm every senator, the senators confirmed all board members, 6 from the governor, 3 from the Senate, and 3 from the House. And my first one was from Donna Mercado Kim. My second term was from David Ige and confirmed by the Senate. So all members like that in 3 different divisions.
But Mr. White, your term began in July.
July, correct.
Okay, and the extension was, I thought September.
I think Mark said that we had it at the July meeting for July through September.
Okay. Okay, if not, we'll hear from DBED.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Hello, Senators, Chris Sadayasu, new DBED Director as of 12/01, December 5th. Thank you for having me. So looking at the agenda, I think the items were explain what DBED's role will be in the issuance of the new RFP for the U.S. brand marketing and management services for the U.S. major market area, and explain who will hold the procurement authority for HTA to settle protests. So Chair, sorry I interrupted earlier when John was up here. Thought I'd be able to explain some of the questions that you had with respect to HOPA. Is my understanding. So I'm going to go with the second one first, because the procurement authority, from my understanding, is from the state procurement officer over to each department as the head of procurement agency. So, or her A might be authority, right? HOPA. Okay, so that's what they keep saying, HOPA. So as DBED director, I will have that delegation as long as the state procurement office then delegates that to us. And then the delegations or designations to each agency is then continued until, as the HOPA, I rescind it, change it, modify it as see fit. So I think our scope of duty or work coming forward is to look at all the delegations and then determine if they're proper, they're properly trained, and then we move forward accordingly. It is my understanding that HTA has delegation designation, and that it's now Mark Togashi as the acting chief administrative officer or the VP of finance. So I think the question for that is explain who will hold the procurement authority for HTA to settle protests. Is my understanding as HOPA, you work together with the delegated agency, the procurement person there, together with state procurement office to properly follow the administrative rules and the law, statute itself, the 103D, and determine what is the proper way forward. So we will act in consultation with the state procurement office and the attached agency to DBED to make all decisions. And we will then consult with counsel and then work appropriately with the parties. So I cannot speak as to what happened prior, but that is how we will move forward to handle the protests. Any questions on that one?
Okay, so this new contract goes out and there's a protest. Then what happens? What's your rule?
So if the new,
Without
well,
anything else changing, what's the rule?
thanks, Senator Kim. So if HTA decides to issue a new RFP, 1 or 2, as Senator Favela mentioned, then if there is a protest, I mean, there is a evaluation committee, a process as laid out in 103D. Then if the award is made, a debrief is offered, and then a protest comes in, then it would then be notified by the agency as to me as HOPA that I would then make a decision as to whether it's valid or what, consult with the Attorney General's and State Procurement Office to then decide what is the proper way forward.
So you could rescind it.
I believe the HOPA does have that authority.
Right.
And I think you mentioned in your previous discussion that the HOPA does have that authority.
So nothing changes. That's in regard to Senator Inouye's question. Just because it's a new administration, the rules are there, the process is there, the delegation is there, all that was followed. And that despite the problems that was done by the past HOPA, supposedly that he followed all of that hoops that led him to this position. So it could happen again, right?
I hope it doesn't happen again,
But it
but
could. Under the
in
existing
consultation,
rules, it could happen again, correct?
that is my understanding, yes.
Senator Inouye.
Okay, thank you. In the first hearing that we had a couple of weeks ago or last week, I asked a question about how the director became also the procurement officer as well. My understanding, the answer was that there was a person designated to do such work and the person left. Or whoever decided that that person disappears or whatever, that's not the question at this point. Would you consider, if you're revamping your agency or the department, to put another person in that role as well and to work along with you?
Thanks, Senator
And
Inouye,
that
for that
person would
question.
be working with the procurement officer.
Okay, I cannot speak as to what happened before. I do understand timelines as laid out by John DeFries. And I do understand his statement that he made that he would take training and be recommending to me that I then delegate to HTA, to John DeFries as the procurement officer for HTA. I have not had that discussion with him, just heard it today. I understand Mark Togashi is currently the delegated person. So if he would like to be the president CEO of HTA and he is properly trained, and then we do the paperwork in conjunction with SPO, and then yes, I would consider doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. But you would still be the one to determine the protest portion, right?
Correct.
Why
And
won't you
because
delegate
it is my understanding, and we can ask State Procurement Office, I know they're on the agenda. I do not delegate for any department designee or any department person who is the HOPA for the department cannot give that away. You're always the HOPA. And so attached agencies do report to me as the HOPA for DBED. So certain powers as written by the admin rules and the statutes 1 and 3D require HOPA's authority, approval, actions. Yes.
That's what I just want to make clear for everybody, so that is the same thing in process. Now, how deeply you get involved with the protest, going as far as wanting to review who's on the committee, review a committee, wanting to review XYZ. I mean, you have that power to request that, but whether or not you take away all that decision from the entity and the agency is clearly could be overstepping.
Yes. Cannot answer for what Director McCartney did. He believed it was in his best interest, in consultation with the Attorney General's State Procurement Office, HTA board, to decide to do what he believed was best. I think the Senator said best that he did what he did, and that's what he decided to do. I don't know decision-making behind that or the rationale behind it, but I would rather not do that myself. I am planning to keep the designation. If John wants to have that authority as a procurement officer, wonderful. If not, it will remain with Mark Togashi, but I do not plan on getting involved unless asked, and then in consultation with State Procurement Office, take appropriate actions.
So it is important that the board of HTA determine whether or not these individuals are suited to be or have that designation based on their performance.
Senator, correct. Yes. So the board hires the president and CEO. makes recommendations or works with the president CEO on all staff positions. As director of DBED, I don't make those decisions. I believe DBED through Senate Bill 3334, if that's the right number, not sure what act number. Now, the DBED director is an ex officio member, but I believe there's only 12 members per the statutes. So I'm not even on the board, but because there's still 12 spots still on the board. So I don't have any decision-making authority
And I
with
share
that.
this for the interest of the board to understand what their role is as far as oversight of the people that they hire to carry on these responsibilities and to tell them that they're not voting on extensions, et cetera. So
Thank you, Senator. And that is correct. And I did see on the December 7th agenda that I attended at the meeting that I attended, board meeting, that there was specific agenda items that asked for specific extensions, including Canada, China, US even, and then I think support services, island chapters and the like. And I think at CNH's request, they asked that there be a defer on those. But the Canada and China were acted upon and they still need to go to the state procurement office to get approvals for that extension. So I would definitely strongly recommend going forward that they continue to put those on the agenda.
And I guess,
As you pointed out.
yeah, I guess I raised concern about meeting the deadline and not extending beyond March. But if they keep approving delay after delay, every time somebody requests that, then we're going to be up against the gun. And so to me, I don't understand what that rationale is to delay.
And I have asked them to provide, I even said at the last board meeting, I'd like timelines and strict timelines for that procurement to find out. I'm still waiting for that information. And they said they'll get it to me shortly. And I think definitely before the December 22nd board meeting to discuss even the extension going forward. So thank you.
But HOPA and oversees that, do you foresee the fact that this is already towards the end of December and that they're going to be able to do this major RFP that has to be rewritten and so forth and selected and so forth and evaluated by the deadline of March?
I am very concerned because there's not only that, there's multiple RFPs that need to go out,
Exactly.
not just the US. There's China, Canada, support services, all of them that they have that were even on the agenda. You can look in agenda. I haven't memorized it. I just started. So yes, I am very concerned because that is a lot of work. And I think that is the reason at the board meeting that staff recommended to the board or the rationale that they asked for the extensions, and then we'll be submitting it to state procurement office to get those extensions. So I think Bonnie, I don't want to speak for her, but she said, I need specific information, including timelines and how to do it. And I believe that she said, and I, sorry if I'm quoting her wrong, that I just didn't get around to it. It's not an excuse, right? You have to have a plan. She needs to see exact timelines, information, rationale for that extension. And that, yeah, I just didn't get to it. It doesn't cut it.
And so by putting off their decision to the next board meeting, from not voting on the 7th to putting it off, it just puts them even more against the deadline. So I don't know what's the
Agreed.
rationale and the judgment being made by HTA at this point to allow that.
Yeah, great question. I think they did it because CNHA filed a protest. I got a copy of it. And the protest said requested deferral of those action items. So
But that
the board decided what they did just because I think CNHA asked because they wanted to verify if there was legal authority for Director McCartney to do what he did on his last day.
But they can still do that whether the board voted or not, or vote or not. In the
Yeah,
meantime, it holds up the
it's-
entire thing, which would put the people asking for the delay into the situation where they don't want the contract to be extended. And
And
it puts
so,
the people with the contract that's extended. I mean, it's crazy.
no, Senator, thank you. And then I did say, and I think the staff did also say, and I think Mark Togashi himself said, they are moving forward with the requests to SPO for the extension. And if granted by them or not, if the board doesn't approve the extension, then the contract dies, right? I mean, there's no extension beyond 12/31/2022, but they're moving in a, what's the right, a linear path, or, you know, they're moving together. They're not, it's not one after the other. So I think to your point, that's a very good point, that you don't want to run up against the deadline, especially with the holidays coming. So thank you for that question.
Sure.
The other attached agencies, who's the HOPA?
The other attachment.
Yeah, HHFDC,
Oh.
HCDA, Stadium Authority now.
Perfect. As DBED director, if the state procurement office does designate the DBED director, I will be the HOPA. Yes. So sorry. So I haven't seen the paperwork. If it's been already, then I will be the HOPA.
It
So
doesn't,
for all of DBED and its attached agencies.
the delegation doesn't stand as until it's amended.
I think they have to just make sure that the directors are, I don't know, I would rather defer to SPO, but I believe I'm the HOPA.
Okay, so you're saying executive directors cannot settle a protest if you're the HOPA?
That is my understanding. I believe the HOPA has that authority. Yes, but they do it in consultation with each other. It's not, they just don't go off and do things on their own. Now, if there is, so if that answers your question, I think
Well, I just want to make sure it's consistent, because if not, HTA has this whole separate. If the other agencies can have their own HOPA.
No other agency has a HOPA. DBED director is the HOPA.
For all attached agencies.
Yes, for all of DBED, correct, and attached agencies. Yes, sir.
DBED director is the HOPA, but in many cases, the attached agencies, the executive director is designated as the HOPA. So for example, NELHA, Greg Barber is the procurement officer for NELHA.
Okay.
Scott Glenn is the HOPA for the state energy office. So are you saying that you're going to just sweep all of that, all of the 12 attached agencies under your procurement authority?
It is, if it's possible to ask Bonnie to come and sit, and just because I think there's a difference in terminology. The HOPA doesn't leave from the director's office. You can designate procurement
No,
officers.
so don't you want to be consistent though?
Oh, no, I do. I
Yeah,
mean,
so if the
I'm
other
pretty sure we
agencies-
are consistent by, and that's why if she can come and explain.
So
because
would you
the
delegate the HOPA to John?
No, I can't delegate being the HOPA. I'm the head of the procurement authority agency.
Oh, well, I
As
think
DBED
I already answered the question. Are you gonna sweep everything, all the agencies under you as the HOPA?
No, I am the HOPA. And Bonnie, is that a correct statement? And if I can ask her, please.
No,
because
but
I
he
think
can
there's a-
delegate that.
I think there's a difference between procurement officer and HOPA. There's a clear difference between the two
It's
positions.
like the chief procurement officer, the division. officer, and
So-
then who delegates.
So the other agencies, executive directors cannot handle a protest. It has to go to you.
That is my understanding. Yes, they can work with me, but say, okay, so say HHFBC does an RFP, they do it all the time. There is a protest. They notify the director's office that there is a protest. And then we work with state procurement office to make sure we follow the law on handling protests, whether it's a DB, whether what, and the like. So can Bonnie, am I clear? Because I do not delegate HOPA. HOPA stays with me. If that makes sense. I think Senator Ken is nodding because that is a true statement that procurement officers are what is being designated, delegated. They're procurement officers for that. And so the executive director, John, Mark, right now, they can move forward with RFPs issuing the and this and that. So 22-01, that was under their delegated authority.
Questions? Any more questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sorry, and Dane Wigger, who you're sure familiar with, his first day as our deputy director. Welcome. Thank you.
Do we confirm him?
yeah. DAGs. And procurement officer.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee. My name is Muling Silliman on behalf of Keith Regan, his home with the flu. So in response to your question here, in terms of explaining the role that DAX has with the rescindment of the RFP, we had no role in it whatsoever. However, SPO, the State Procurement Office, is an attached agency to DAX. And Bonnie, the acting administrator, who's been participating in a lot of info briefings, she's here, and I'll defer the procurement questions.
Well, there's not a lot. This is only our second one. We can have a lot.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair, members of the committee, Bonnie Kakui, Acting Administrator and Chief Procurement Officer for the Executive Branch. The State Procurement Office did not have any decision-making in the rescission of the contract or the cancellation of the solicitation. Our only role is to advise the agency if they're going to cancel an award, and the intent is to cancel this, to not award at all, then they need to cancel the solicitation as well. That is the process.
Is there a minimum, or what are the triggers? Is there any kind of minimum actions or requirements that would allow them to justify canceling?
There is not. When the protest has to be issued 5 days after an award is made. And then if there's a request for a debriefing, 5 days after the completion of the debriefing,
Yeah, put it on the side, maybe.
then the agency takes all relevant information and a decision is made whether to sustain, deny, and in this case, then Director McCarthy decided to rescind the award, cancel the solicitation.
So, but you're not concerned, I'm not saying just specifically in this case, but in any case, if I guess any HOPA now says, hey, I don't like what happened, let's just rebid.
Well, the assumption is that they would have a reasonable justification
Yeah,
for.
but who
It is-
disqualifies that?
It is their decision to make as the head of the purchasing agency, if they're going to cancel a solicitation and it's in the best interest of the state. But there has to be documentation, there should be documentation in the contract file why this award was rescinded and the solicitation canceled.
And who reviews that?
It's not a review by the State Procurement Office, if that's what you're asking. We do get a copy of the, well, right now, there's no protest since the award is canceled. The protest is moot already. There's nothing to protest.
No, what I'm asking is when the director decides, hey, I don't like the outcome, I'm going to cancel the RFP, that way the protest is null and void. There's no minimum requirements to justify canceling the RFP. How is that recorded?
It's not, okay, it's recorded within the contract files themselves. There should be a memo for file or a letter, internal memorandum for file, that the reasons why they're canceling. And there should be a justification as well. It could be a number of instances that there was something wrong with the process, there was a violation of law, or in this case, he's citing it's the best interest of the state to cancel.
Ooh, so something generic.
Yes, yes,
Question, so
yes.
you have received that letter from the DBED director?
I received a copy of the letter, the same one that the vendors, the proposals did to Monaghan, is basically the same thing
And
that
so
the other one was.
justification was merited the cancellation.
Let's see, I have a copy. I have a copy.
That was the letter of
December 5th. Right. He doesn't specify exactly what it is. He just cites that it is his belief that there needs to be 2 contracts, one for marketing communications and one for destination brand management. And the single contract would not only put us at a competitive disadvantage in the market, but also dealing with the community. That's his justification.
Did he put a justification for the first, reasoning for the first?
I have not seen one.
protest?
I did not see one.
So what does that mean when you say you do not see one?
I didn't get a copy of the letter. I don't know if HTA has it within their contract documents.
And if there was no letter, then what?
There has to be documentation.
What if there's
That-
none? In writing?
Well, they did cancel the solicitation and the award.
Okay, so here's, and you know my concerns about this procurement issue,
Mhm.
because the concern is that there is nothing in that you have that even allow you to oversee and say, no, you can't cancel this. Anybody can cancel for any reason. I mean, not anybody, any HOPA or procurement officer. And I hear it from contractors all the time that when something comes up and they don't like it, they just decide to withdraw. And that's not right. So as the chief procurement officer, what can we do to change this, one? And two, if there is no justification, if there is no letter, then what's the legal ramification?
Well, we would have to take a look to see if there actually was an action taken. If the action was, the award was rescinded, and I believe it was, because you cannot go forward with a second RFP without rescinding the first one and canceling the first one.
But how can you cancel the first one if there is no, you didn't follow the law and there's no justification?
Well, again, the justification, all the rules say is that the head of the purchasing agency can cancel. The agencies can't cancel if they believe it's in the best interest of the state. So if there has to be a documentation in that.
Right, so if there's no documentation, Bonnie, then what happens? See, that's the problem with the law, there is no teeth, right? You're saying that it's supposed to have this, nobody checks it. If it didn't, then what? It makes it null and void that the first one was even rescinded?
The cancellation was, the award was canceled and the solicitation canceled. That's documented in our
Right.
Hawai'i
Contesting
awards
for the
notices.
justification.
Status
Justification is
system.
required by.
Yes, it is.
So if there is no justification, then what?
Then it shouldn't have gone forward.
Right, so now
But
what?
there
What's
is-
the remedy? What's the remedy for the fact that if there is no justification, what's the remedy? Doesn't matter, that we did all
Okay.
this stuff, because you can go back and say, you know what, that's all null and void because you violated the law to begin with. So we're gonna take away all of that, go back.
So you're asking if they did or did not cancel it?
I'm saying, did they have the justification that is required by the rules or the?
So the last year when the law was passed, it says that the agencies are required to post a justification for minimum of 10 days. It did not specify how detailed that justification should be. So
So
there is
was that posted? Was the justification, no matter how short it was it? Posted?
it was posted. It was,
Can we
yes, it
get a
was
copy
posted.
of it?
It's on our Hawai'i Awards and Notices data system, which is what you're required by statute. I would have to pull it up online and find out what it is. We can forward that to you.
Required to post a justification for the withdrawal. Is that what
I'm
you
sorry,
said?
say that again.
The law says that they're required to post a justification for the withdrawal,
For the cancellation,
cancellation.
right,
Okay.
for the cancellation of a solicitation, that's what the law says.
Okay, and so if that's not been posted, then what?
I'm not sure, I'd have to go and take a look, but again, they could not go forward with a second RFP if
But
there
you
is
know-
no.
But you know, they go for it anyway. That's the problem with our laws. It's so.
Okay, so what we would do, we periodically go through the awards and they take that back. We periodically go through the awards if it's posted on a Hypro, because now we have insight into all of those solicitations and see those that are awarded or not awarded, and we would contact the agency. We don't have that ability to do that on hands, because that's just a posting mechanism. So we would, we try to periodically review what's still outstanding out there and go to the agency and say, this has been awarded or canceled, and it's been on the books for, so many years or so many months. What do you plan to do with it? But we don't have the resources to monitor every single solicitation
that's not on HIPRO. So that is an issue, and that's why we're going forward with the new e-procurement system.
So just because it's not on HIPPO, they can not follow the law.
No, they have to, follow the
There's no
law.
teeth in the law, Bonnie.
You're right, there isn't,
Yeah, what-
there isn't.
Have to,
So-
but how do you enforce?
How,
Maybe
exactly,
can
how do you
you
enforce it?
tell us how are we gonna enforce this, or what can we do to give it some teeth? Because you cannot just allow agencies to cancel. UH does that. Water supply does that. They all do that. They don't like the outcome, they withdraw.
I don't know if that's an accurate statement that they, just because they don't like it. I mean, they still have, they're still subject to audits from, the legislative auditors, that you go through a procurement and you have to look at the documents and say, did you follow the process or not?
But Bonnie,
I
we
think
looked
that
at
was-
some of those documents in our procurement.
Right.
And we saw that they didn't, and nothing happened to them. Nothing happened to them. They increased the scope, they do all this
I
stuff.
remember those
You hear
briefings.
all of that.
I remember
And,
those
I hear
briefings.
from the private sector all the time in construction things. They withdraw these multi-million-dollar bids. They only get one bid, or they only get two bids. They don't like it. They get a protest, they withdraw. Happens at the airport all the time.
You're right, there is no enforcement mechanism, or if there is one, it has to be determined a felony first before we can step in and assess administrative fines. And we've had that discussion with the AG's office, that it's very difficult to pursue a felony.
Can't you just say that there is a violation? Because I know that based on past procurement people that I work with on the hydrogen thing, everything, they refuse to say the word violation. They refuse. And so I said, when they don't, and you did that too the other day. I said, they didn't follow the law. Is that a violation? Well, no, that's not really a violation. Then what is it? If you don't follow the law, it's a violation.
It has to be a clear-cut violation that they skipped over steps. So those
So
are the
what's a not
violations.
clear-cut? Like, you can't be partially pregnant, right? I mean, it's like, you either followed it or you didn't. And if you didn't, then
For example, I know Mark cited the disclosure of the evaluations. So the rules say that they were asked, why did they release the evaluation scores? And the rules do say that you have to submit, if the vendors ask for documents upon award, you can release these documents to include, but not limited to, and there's a whole list. So HTA probably decided that that was amongst those documents that could be released. Was that a violation? Not necessarily the way the rules are written. But should they have, that's a whole different aspect.
okay, well, so that's a problem. Then how do you get that kind of consistent
Cleaned up.
judgment across the board?
And it's very difficult because then you have to take into account every single situation that ever existed. So could we strengthen the law? Possibly a little bit. 103D 303, which is the RFP request for competitive proposal. If you strengthen the law and say at the debriefing that you cannot release any information at all until the contract is executed, that would make it very clear cut to all agencies. Will you get pushback from vendors? Most likely. So there's going to be a give and take on each one of those.
So do you believe that RFP 1 and RFP 2, the processes were conducted fairly and according to procurement law?
From what I understand, that they were conducted fairly. There are some issues that I do have finding out after the fact about additional people in the evaluation room or evaluation committees or however they did that. I think that was probably not best practices. People that are in the evaluation should only be those that are on the evaluation committee or administrative support to that committee.
So the fact that they were there and could influence the process, you still think that's fair?
No, I didn't say that. I just think,
No, I asked if you,
Yes.
I asked you if
No,
you thought
it-
it was
it
conducted
should not
fairly
be-
and accordingly.
okay, fairly. It could have been done fairly if they had no voice in anything. They should not be giving any advice to anybody on the evaluation committee. Should they have been sitting in there? Probably not. If they had no voice and no action on it, was their presence there? If they had no influence, then, and if they also should also be signing a non-disclosure agreement. And if they did all of that, then the process was still fair.
But they
But
didn't.
yes, that's the problem. And see, I didn't find out about their extraneous people until after it was already done.
So what's the consequence?
There is no consequences according to statutes and rules. So for us to, what would we impose a violation on that they didn't use common sense? They didn't use good judgment is what the consequences are right now.
Okay, so is that in writing from your office to the HOPA?
No, I did not. I was not asked about that.
An
Again, I
evaluation
found
of-
out.
Because they're saying, hey, we want to learn from the previous
Yes,
process.
absolutely.
So what would that mean?
We have a whole course on RFP process from the review committee and the contract administrators' responsibilities and roles, evaluation committee's roles. We have all of that.
But have you evaluated their processes to see where they need to take corrective action?
No, I have not.
But you're aware that there's some that needs to be made.
Yes. Yes. And we'll be working with Chris very closely on that. And if he wants to invite the board to this, we're more than welcome to go over that with the board members as well. Please keep in mind that my authority is only over the department and not the board members. So I can't make them come. I can just encourage them to come
But you delegate that authority to the departments,
to
right?
the department heads.
So
right?
why not as a consequence say, you know what, you guys messed up. I'm taking back my delegated
Sure.
authority.
I can. I don't think that would be practical with
But there has
only,
to be some consequence.
yes, but the consequence would be then HTA or DBED would not have any procurements going out at all. Because I only have 3 active procurement specialists right now, so their operations would halt.
You could give it to someone else in the department.
I could, and we've
Could
done
give it
that.
To ASO.
We've done that in the past. We did take away delegation from certain people and say that we're delegated now to, I don't recall who it was, maybe it was a deputy, maybe it was a division chief, until certain time, I think it was a matter of months, and had them redo all the classes all over again. So that can be done.
So if there seems to appear to be a conflict of some sort, you can do that. And then once you delegate it, it's like in this case with Chris, he has the responsibility to make sure that HTA has the right people that can do the
Right.
procurement, right? Take the classes and are in following
Yes.
the rules.
So my delegation is to the head of the purchasing agent, to the department head as the head of the purchasing agency. They can further delegate down to their division chiefs or to their whoever they
But
feel.
attached agencies are the same as a division.
Yes, they are.
And they don't need your authority to do that?
No, we are giving them the authority to do that.
No, you just
when we
said that
delegate-
you have the authority to delegate them as a.
Yes, and we gave them the authority to delegate further down. And they have to
Maybe
take
that's the issue.
to have, the issue is
Well,
them
so-
delegating it
so-
down.
Well, for instance, once you found that people were in the room, you thought it was inappropriate. At that point, you could take corrective action to say, I'm taking back what I delegated.
I could have, I didn't do that at the time. I thought it would be more prudent to find out exactly what all is happening. They were still at that point, still in the protest
protest period, and to disrupt that, I think would have been just as harmful.
But had you done that, we might not have this problem in the second.
The third time.
RFP, the third time.
But again, a lot of that didn't come out till this last WAM hearing, which was November
Oh, really?
28.
Because I thought they keep saying they were checking with you. They get
Again, they
all
were
the-
checking with us on specific things and on, can we do this? Can we do that? But we didn't learn about some of the inconsistencies until much later, when we heard from, in this earlier WAM meeting.
Senator Inouye.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for being here. Appreciate it. With the letter of December 5th to HBCD as well as to CMHA with regards to the cancellation. And I'll read a portion of it because I was wondering if there was any recommendation to a continual action that is to follow. So in Mike's letter, he did say with regards to the RFP 2201 to the CMH is being rescinded in his authority, and that RFP 2201 is hereby canceled. So the services described in RFP 2201 will be resolicited in an effort to arrive at the utmost and advantageous to the people of Hawai'i. But when you read further, he does say this decision to rescind the award and cancel the solicitation should not be considered a ruling on the protest filed by HVCB in June 2022. The decision is final and binding. So hearing the questions about following up, is there supposed to have been I guess a filing of probably an output to the public or to everyone else. Did that ring a flag also with AG here? Was there a follow-up to that letter? So we're saying that this is final. So was there another step that was supposed to be done?
No, there was not another step that needed to be done. Once he rescinded the award and then canceled solicitation, there was no protest. The protest basically
Null and
went
void.
away.
Yeah.
So this is appropriate then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Senator Favela.
So what can we do as legislators and lawmakers to hold people and these things accountable, because we still don't know about the first letter. It is out there as it wouldn't have been rescinded, but we still don't know because we have everybody in the room. Nobody even want to try to look for the letter, whoever was involved with the letter process. So it might not even be a letter, because we get people in the room right now that was processed with this letter that was for the first one to be rescinded, but nobody is in here ready to say, I can pull them up, or I got one copy of them. Nobody has one. So we assuming what Senator Kim saying, that there is no letter. So if there is no letter, what is the legal ramifications that we need to take, or you need to take going forward? So now no more letter. What is the steps? If there's no letters on the first one, the second one, all in void, then we gotta go back to the first one, because there was no actual letter rescinding it. That's why we no, because we no, as we go into session, we need to change laws. Yeah, we need to change laws because, hey, hold on, you guys found the letter, you guys had a chance when Senator Kim was talking for 16 hours. She was talking for 16 hours, nobody passed the letter. Okay, bottom line is, you guys should have given her a letter when she was talking. Okay, so now I talk to you guys about the letter, great, thank you. But the thing is, okay, now how are we gonna change the law?
We should have US first.
How are we gonna change the law? How we can change the law going forward, so that this kind of stuff doesn't happen in the future. That's how we like advice from you guys, because we need to change something here, because it seems like the best interest of the state and the people is not enough. It's not enough.
Oh, well, okay, one of the steps then would have to be to change 103D 308, which says the agencies have the authority to cancel in the best interest of the state. So if that's your attempt, you would need to strengthen that language to say best interest of the state, provided that.
Yeah.
Whatever it is.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, but here you have the HOPA who says in the first cancellation, it's because clarified requirements, associated evaluated criteria scoring. And then in months later, in the second one, oh, because it should be separated. Oh, duh, why didn't it come up on the first one? You know what I mean? It's like anybody's whim at that point. That, well, now it should be two, maybe next time it'll be 3 contracts. Maybe, you know, it shouldn't be 2, it should be 3.
I do recall, I did not see the letter, but I do recall seeing the differences between why he canceled it because of the different components. And I did email Senator Wakai what the difference is on the 2 RFPs and why they felt that it was necessary to put out the second RFP. But again, your question is, how can we strengthen it? Change 103D 308 to be very specific on what it is that you will accept as a justifiable reason. And it's going to be a little bit tough because you're going to have to take into account for possibly every single scenario that's out there. And if it's not there, would then the agencies have a reason to say that, well, it wasn't in that. So I would be very, cognizant of that concern.
Well, then it would go to protest, right? The protest would then have to go through the process.
Or that's the other thing we can do is, if that's what the senators want, is take away that right to cancel in the best interest of the state completely, and it has to go through protest.
We don't want to do that completely, but there should be some guidelines. It shouldn't be open willy-nilly.
Oh, okay. Well, that's what I'm saying. Those are some of the things that you'd have to strengthen that 103D, because it's only for like 4 lines, and it does say in the best interest of the state.
So Bonnie, do you have suggestions for us where other states may have a tighter procurement law?
I would have to, actually look at it and see what other kinds of language we
Yeah.
could put in there that would.
Because I don't,
Such like
if
that.
we're going to do this, I don't want the departments or the public to think that we're pulling this out of our hat or someplace else. That we have something, valid that it works in other places. Yeah. So
I will take a look at it and see where we can strengthen that law. I think I need to know from the legislatures though, which direction do you want to go and how strict or how strict you want to be.
well, I think you should just throw everything in there that you think we should or could do, and then we will determine how far we want to go.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to be reasonable, but we just don't want the just wide range of, somebody just feel like, well, I don't like these guys, I like this other guy better. I mean,
I don't think anybody's going to admit to that.
no, nobody will, but I'm just saying that.
Yeah, but the fact that you laughed, that happens.
You notice what I'm happy to say,
Or just because there's a protest, you can't just withdraw. I mean,
I guess the bottom line is what we get now ain't working. So, if you can throw some suggestions and we can look at it, I think that would be much better.
and then put some teeth in it, like, and if you don't follow this, then, it's gonna, your decision will be null and void and something, I don't know. All suspended, yeah. So.
When you have form SPOs 36. And the HOPA says, well, I'm taking some of that back. Is there another form?
No. Well, the SPL Form 36 tells us that the head of the purchasing agency made that determination, that person can conduct procurement or act as a procurement officer on that particular method of procurement.
But it's like a checklist that they're delegating.
Yeah, well, it's the 6 methods of procurement are on there.
So,
Well, more than that is on
well,
here.
no, the top part is only for the forms. I think that might have been
Well, there's
misstated. The
One oh
first-
three D, 103F. I mean, there's
Oh,
all these
yes.
different
So-
sections with
right,
checkboxes.
Right, so the top portion of that says, who is delegated authority to sign particular forms? And it's a whole bunch of forms. Then there's a part that says delegation for 103D methods of procurement, and then delegation for 103F methods of procurement. And then there's.
Yeah, so if the HOPA says, yeah, I'm gonna handle this one, but they've already delegated it.
They can delete the delegation.
Yeah, so
Or
it would have
revise.
to be. Can it be like a phone call like what we heard, or does it have to be an amendment to the form?
That
Be in
form
writing.
will show new, revised, deleted. And so when they send that to us, then we will update our records.
Okay,
And then when we are talking to someone about their procurement, we will ask them, do you have delegation? And depending what their answer is, if they say they don't, then, we'll ask to speak to someone who has delegation to conduct that particular procurement. If they do, generally we'll look at our records to make sure that they do in fact have that delegation and that they have the training.
okay. It seems to have gotten back and forth though with the previous HOPA.
That sounds like that he's given authority to conduct and act as a procurement officer, but only certain aspects of it. That's what it sounds like he did.
Good. So if he doesn't do another form that amends this so that he can take it back,
He could have done an internal, those people still can conduct the procurement and act as a procurement officer, but he, in his delegation, can dictate what he wants oversight over, which is apparently what he did.
yeah, so but that didn't occur in writing.
Not to my knowledge, but we only looking for the 36 that gives them that ability to conduct the procurement.
So what's to prevent someone from doing that again? Saying, hey, on this one, I'm gonna take this component, I'm gonna take this component back, but nothing in writing. Because this is delegating, I mean, it gives you specifics like you're talking about,
Right.
but that it didn't stay completely delegated during this process.
No, we don't get a second form saying only certain aspects of a procurement is delegated or not. So we don't get it. So
Oh,
I think,
so maybe we should require that if they are gonna do that, they should at least copy you. Because you have to turn this form into you now,
yes, they do.
so why wouldn't
Yes.
any amendments be?
Yeah, they do have to send us any amendments, but normally it's either revising, taking away a delegation completely from a particular method of procurement or deleting it completely. We don't ask to see, that they're only going to get parts of a procurement. We are under the assumption that once you've given delegation, you've given it to them to perform their work in its entirety.
So then, does that make the actions that were taken by the previous HOPA still lawful? If he delegated it already?
Again, the term lawful and unlawful is, I think might be a little bit, I would have to ask the AG if that's a term we can use to take away a delegation. Best practices, probably not. I mean,
Because then we wouldn't rescind the action taken if he had already delegated his authority to someone else.
at the time that they conduct the procurement, they have to have delegation. They know what delegation they have. We can look at to see what delegation they have. At that time they were doing it, they had delegation.
Yeah,
If he's
at the start,
rescinded
they
it,
had delegation.
yes,
It was the in-between that got all messy.
yeah. If they took it off, if they took back delegation, then those persons should have stopped completely and going on to the next person who has the delegated authority to conduct that procurement. So that would be a violation if whoever took it over is now conducting that procurement without delegation. A question, follow question. So the letter that was given to HVCB and I guess to CNHA, does that constitute the statement required by the law for the withdrawal or the cancellation of the?
It would if that was what was put on the cancellation.
No, so what I'm saying is that a letter went out to each of them, but is there a separate letter that's supposed to go into the file to say, I hereby cancel this based on?
Not necessarily. I think that letter would suffice. It shows the intent that they intended to cancel. But they still have to now go back into the Hawaii Awards and Notices database system and
Clean it up. Yeah.
post the notice that it was canceled.
That's why you had mentioned, you had commented that that letter is okay
Yes.
up to that point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Bonnie, how long have you been in this position?
January 3rd, 2021.
Not long, but you've been in the,
2020. I've been with the State Procurement Office since 2005.
so I guess, in all of these years and issues that we may have had on procurements and contracts, et cetera, has it ever risen, well, for your attention, risen to the level of asking the auditor to step in and do an audit?
I think there has been, but I couldn't cite one particular case or not.
But do you have, a line, I guess, that if it's cost that you would do?
We don't have power to audit.
No,
Our statute
you don't
says,
audit. I'm saying, asking that we have an auditor
yes.
to do so, or,
Well,
I'm sorry.
but
But we do have,
we did the procurement investigation.
yes,
for the hydrogen,
we've done those.
Right, and we've done those, and that led to, but even then.
yeah, but
even
if
though
we don't
saw-
know about stuff and she is getting information
Right.
or not getting information,
Right,
yeah, what happens at that point?
So when
I'm not saying you don't, I'm not saying, I'm just asking.
So when we get, thank you. So when we get a complaint or request that an agency, there may be some inconsistencies in the procurement, we will take a look at it. We'll investigate as best we can, pulling in the people that are participants into that particular procurement. You know, how it started, who was involved, who said what to whom. If we have to ask the vendors, we will ask the vendors, you know, what their role was in that. And then we will do a report to the head of the purchasing agency. If he hadn't already been, he or she hadn't already been drawn in, and, you know, discuss the issues with them and how they plan to move forward so that that kinds of instances will not happen again.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Chair.
Oh, we also have the Attorney General. Maybe you can just come up at the same time.
So,
Go ahead.
so you, I mean, I guess the question is, so you think that we're at the level where they should be audited?
I would have to ask, what would be? I don't know if you want to audit just one particular solicitation. Maybe you should be auditing their whole procurement practices and see if there's any, you know, reoccurring issues.
Sounds like a recommendation. Huh? Is that a recommendation?
Well, I think that they just started this June or July, or what did they say, October? They just started with a 103D, so this would be the only one that you're auditing at this point, I believe, unless they have some other procurements that we're not aware of.
Thank you, Bonnie.
so Bonnie, could you give us a list of all the procurements over a certain amount for RFPs, solicitations that were canceled and reasons? So we have what the breadth of these kinds of withdrawals or cancellations.
We would only have that information since last July when that statute went into effect. Prior to that,
we would have to poll every single agency and ask them what their,
That's
what
voluntary.
says.
That
Well,
would
let's
be
just,
voluntary.
let's just get what you have.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, any questions for the Attorney General?
Just like to clarify for Senator DeCoy, every 5 years, HTA needs to get audited. In 2023 is when that 5-year timetable is up. So they're going to get audited. So you might want to talk to the auditor as to like what you want him to look at, what's coming.
Yeah. Yeah, if they're still around.
Yeah.
Would you like to share the Attorney General's role?
Thank you, Chair. My name is Ann Lopez. I'm the Attorney General. I have actually brought Greg Kinkley, who was named repeatedly today. He is the subject matter expert and has been working with DBED for many years. So I'm going to let him take 20 minutes.
Thank you. First of all, I'm very eager to answer any questions as directly and fully as I can. But of course, because I'm counsel for at least 50% of the people in this room, excluding staff, it's hard for me to be able to divulge actual details about advice and counsel I give. So I hope you'll be understanding that that is covered by attorney-client privilege. But the narrow answer to explaining the role of the Attorney General in the rescission of RFP 2201 is that we offer advice and counsel to our client when they ask us about the legality of certain actions.
Were you asked on the two withdrawals, rescinding, were you asked by anybody from HTA?
Are you kicking me under the table or may I answer that?
Whether or not we provided advice to the department falls into the category of
It's
privileged
not the question. The question was,
conversation.
were you asked? I didn't ask if you gave advice. I just asked whether or not you were asked.
Whether or not we were asked is a privileged question that we will not answer.
Waste of time.
So then, what confused me is that the clients all came up, said it was in constant contact with you. Now, you come up, so can't the clients in here waive that? Or you're an attorney, right? Can't the clients, because I know clients can do that all the time.
Yes.
And any of them at one time right now, since to our senators here, we waive them. Can you just answer yes or no to the senators and ask them if they can waive that? And then give us an answer. Because if that's the case, you guys wasted our time. Seriously, I mean, I understand your legalities, but are you telling us that everybody already know that they did ask? You know, because they all said it. Every single one that came up here said they constantly was in talk with you guys. And then when we ask you the question point blank, I can't answer the question. So then what you should do is before you came up, yeah, you should have got a letter from all of them saying if we can or cannot, when we come up, to speak to the senators and give them a straight answer. If that's the case, and again, you should have just told the senators here, including the chair, that you guys cannot answer any questions and then just don't come up. Because that's the thing right there, what they're saying. So you have your clients here, so she's asking you not in any client particular, if they had asked, it's a yes or no, and that's a privileged question. So again, so I don't know if your clients over here want to relinquish that, but since they all said they talked to you, shouldn't they be able to?
You're correct. They have every right to waive the attorney-client privilege, and if they'd like to do so here, I would just want to know what the breadth of that waiver is. But if it's to factual questions about what they did and didn't do, I'm happy for them to make that waiver if that's what they decide to do. It's not a problem for me.
Well, is there a willingness on the executive director or the board chair of allowing them to answer, one, whether or not they were asked, and two, how many times were they asked?
I'm fine, but I want to get my legal counsel to say why he does stuff. I have no secrets or hiding anything.
So do you wait?
No,
They're saying you gotta wait before they can say anything.
Waiver, but I'm saying I want to ask their advice on why I can or can't, or should or shouldn't, but I have nothing to hide. I mean, that's not, I don't want to have unintended consequences for anyone else. You're dying with that. I'm fine not waiving it either.
The director too, the rector and the staff.
Yeah. Privileged conversations are generally held tightly because there can be a process, and it happens in civil lawsuits and criminal lawsuits, that if you waive a certain privilege or the right to certain advice that you receive, there can be a conclusion that you have waived all of the advice that you've received. And you're certainly able to do that. Everybody here is a client of the Attorney General. I would generally advise people, if you want to waive so that you can clarify certain issues, that you make it narrow and say, I'll waive any privilege related to the facts that occurred during this procurement. I would limit that waiver to what advice or legal interpretation you actually received. But certainly with respect to.
Can I recommend that we just ask the question and you give them advice if they want it waived or not?
I'm okay, I'll defer to my AG of what you feel comfortable, because saying on my behalf, maybe that might feel like in regard to this or no.
But you're not the only
I'm
client.
just saying for me.
Yeah,
personally.
yeah, there's the others that have to claim that.
No, but
as
he's
well.
the chair. He hires and he oversees the entire staff. So I'm sure the staff doesn't look at him for every question.
He already said
Yeah.
he was left out of the loophole from all of the things that
No,
happened.
well, but I think the recommendation was gonna be, if a question is asked, then you guys can determine if you can waive or not.
So the only question that I'm asking you guys to ask them to answer is what Senator Kim had asked. Once they, I'm not gonna ask you guys to go back to the chemical and come back. I just want to ask the question that Senator Kim had asked, where you guys asked question, is it yes or no?
Which is very.
That was the
narrow.
question that she asked.
Yeah, it was very narrow.
Very
Whether
narrow.
or not you were asked at any point in time from HTA about the rescinding, if that was, they should, it was legal. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I'm not asking for the answers, whether or not you were asked and how many times were you asked, because there were a number of, there were like 2 rescinds, right? And so, you know, were you asked numerous times by different people from HTA, only by the procurement officer, this, whether or not you're asked. And how many times?
If you feel comfortable answering that question, Greg, I think that narrow question is fine to answer, and that we've received the waiver from our client.
I do. Yes, many times.
You're asked many times on both solicitations.
Certainly on RFP 2, less on RFP 1, but yes, on RFP 1 as well. I might also add that, of course, our office only counsels our clients to do legal acts.
Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to follow up or ask about your interpretation of the law. In HRS 3-126-35, in order to cancel a solicitation after an award, an agency must determine that the award or RFP is in violation of the law. Is that your understanding? Because that's different than what occurred.
Let me make sure. Are you asking it can only be rescinded if there is a violation of law?
An agency must determine that the award or RFP is in violation of the law in order to cancel the solicitation. So if you can just quickly look at the HRS to see if that's consistent.
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. Could I ask 35, what subchapter is that in? What's the title of the subparagraph?
Well, it's procurement.
No, each one has.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, because there are lots of different subchapters that address.
Well, I would just think that
different issues.
knowing that this got canceled so many times, you would at least be familiar with this section. So if you're not, then maybe we
Yes,
can-
it was canceled twice, not many times. And yes, it was done in accordance with law. One might imagine, because I can't give legal counsel on this, that perhaps the wrong part of 3:126 is being quoted, perhaps an inapplicable part. I don't know. I don't have it in front of me.
But the bottom line is that we have concluded that the rescission was legal.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, we can follow up. Okay, any other questions for Attorney General? As unhelpful as they may be.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and then we'll just call them up real quickly and to just in case members have questions about for CNHA and HVCB.
Together?
Yeah, together.
Not together?
Yeah. Unless you want to stay longer.
No, sir.
So I know last time, the director had said he had told both of you about what he was planning to do right before the Ways and Means hearing, 2 weeks ago. I'm sure that was probably a surprise to both of you.
Yeah, to a certain extent. I think it was the week of Thanksgiving was the first we knew it was going to be difficult to get the approval. We realized it was it was something new. But it wasn't until there was a meeting, I believe, with the procurement office and the AG's office. And coming from that, we could tell that it was not a good result.
When was that meeting?
I believe it was the week of Thanksgiving, maybe the Tuesday before.
Okay, so
they could tell you, but I just know that it was happening. And afterwards, we got hints. Yeah.
So when you were both approached about this settlement.
The mediation. Yeah.
When was that?
Yeah. It was early September, probably. The meeting, we came to our tentative agreement on September 28th, I believe.
Okay.
So
But the Attorney General and the SPO were not included in that meeting.
they were not.
Okay, because I think if they were, it would have saved you at least 6 weeks.
At least 2 months. Yeah, well, yeah.
2 months.
Yeah, 2 months.
Okay, did any of you ask if it was okay with the Attorney General and the SPO to proceed with the settlement?
We did ask, and we were told that they were in consultation with the AG and the SPO. I believe both John and I were told that.
Yep. It's our impression that the AG and the chief procurement officer or the procurement office were being apprised of the situation as we went along. And like I said, I think we knew it was going to be difficult, but we were never told that it was going to be impossible. Let's put it that way.
So in his mediation, prior to his mediation meeting, any one of you, basically, let me see, HVCB, gotta make sure I get these acronyms. Was ever approached or ever told, since CNHA got the second bid, would you guys be willing to work with them, subcontract or working with them, let the bid go through, and then you guys work with them I guess together on this bid?
Yeah, in answer to that, first of all, on June 21st, we filed a protest to the award, just as CNHA had provided on the award we won in January or December, actually. So our first focus was to concentrate on that to find out whether we had a valid protest or not. And Mike, Mr. McCartney, according to the procurement rules, was supposed to act expeditiously on that protest. And it drug out, and we challenged him. We needed to rule on the protest. We were asking for additional information that took us a while to get. And then the idea of mediation came up. And so the focus went from protest to added mediation with the protest always being part of the process. And as I just told you, the mediation fell apart. However, to answer your question directly, there was in passing a discussion that not really a discussion, just, hey, would you guys be interested in subcontracting? But as I said at the time, the focus was on the protest. Then in working with Kihio Lewis and his team, we were able to come up to an agreement in mediation. So that thought, went to the back burner.
So at any time while doing that with Mike, did you guys not know that there would only be like one contract issued? And were you willing to, whether it be you or CNHA, either one of you giving up to be that one contract awardee?
I would just say we had inquired with the DBED director as to why that couldn't be a scenario. And I'm not sure the reason why, but he basically said that he believed this was that we both have strengths to bring. So, yeah, I mean, and just senators, to clarify, we were awarded on the 2nd of June, June 21st, they submit their protest. And then June 29th, they get an extension of their award. And then we respond to their protest on August 6th, which clarifies a lot of the things. I think there's been a lot of assertion that points to the protest, but we also responded to their protest as well. And I think that should be given some consideration. I also want to clarify that with respect to the statement that came up earlier, the statement that was issued with HTA, CNHA, I wanted to clarify that CNHA was opposed, and we sent Director McCartney a letter strongly opposing any additional extensions, which is where the mediation came into the picture. We told him that we were looking at how we could stop any future extensions until a decision was made on the protest. And so what he did instead was asked if we could get together and mediate and find a solution. So we agreed to that. The statement that came out of DBED, CNHA, HVCB was because we were agreeable to the extension as long as the mediated agreement was also included in that release. Because we didn't want just an extension to be mentioned, we wanted the situation in which we were proceeding forward together to be highlighted as well. So that's how that came about.
So I guess you was agreeable because basically you were told or insinuated that an extension would continue on until you two both would agree on working that contract together. Is that what happened?
Well, essentially, the mediation presented a 2-contract solution. So yeah, and that was under that premise, we decided to go forward, as did CNHA.
So you didn't question him at all on basically saying, we know there should be one contract issued, so why are we where we are today? Well, at that time talking, because if I'm not mistaken, your first initial contract didn't have all the things in, the first proposal wasn't the same things that was in the second proposal, which basically almost overlapped CNHA's proposal. So my question is, were you given privy to the proposal of CNHA's?
Was I?
Yeah.
No. To whose proposal?
So the proposal that CNHA had.
CNHA had for when? The second RFP?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely not. They received our proposal prior to us receiving our debrief after the first one, but we did not receive. Absolutely not.
Why would you not?
Now, are you talking about the first proposal or the second proposal?
Question Mike on his motives at that time.
Question Mike.
On why the mediation process took place. Knowing that you guys are fully aware that there could have only been one contract issue.
We were not fully aware of that. We went into the mediation with the thought of bifurcating the contract. That was the whole basis of the mediation.
That means either they never actually consulted with the Attorney General or the
We
SPO.
thought we were working on a two contract solution.
And if I could clarify,
We did not know that.
just to support the conversation, Mike was under the impression that as the HOPA, he had the ability to settle this by whatever means was necessary, mediation. And that's what he was attempting to do. I think he found out later that that's not the case.
Because the SPO and the AG were not included. Because if that meeting that happened right after Thanksgiving happened in September, this would have we would have had a different outcome.
Correct.
So the only question I have for you guys, and this is what's been bothering me, I didn't ask this earlier, but I was looking at my notes and going into this mediation, it was told by the chair that HTA's delegate or representative was the president of the board. The reason why I questioned that, and I talked to Mike the last time here, you know, nobody, I don't think anybody in this building don't know the relationship that he has with the president of the board. So I thinking it was like, it didn't mean to, but it's like me and her friends, and I invite him to come in and bypass this, and then later on, now we find out we did something wrong, and now he has to have a title while he was there. But I think it was just a brother kind. Yeah, we'll come together, which I settle this, because we all know Mike McCurney. I love the guy. Okay, I know he's a brother guy, but nobody in this room don't know that the relationship that he has with the president of the board of HTA, and they know that. I mean, the relationship that they have, and just like bringing in this mediation, thinking that they could bypass the board because of that relationship and never have at that time the vice chair of that board being a part of it. That's the reason why they didn't take certain votes in certain things, and they kind of recollect, because it calls your judgment when you went there as a friend. You understand? And then now there's legal ramifications that you're only going to slap on a wrist, but that's the whole thing. That's how I know, because I would have that phone call that this mediation was going to happen, and I told him, no, you cannot separate them. That's the conversation I had with Mike. And that's the conversation I had with him, and I told him that day, that's the reason why I know who was in the room with them and what was said. And now today he went answer the chair saying that he was representing the Hawaii Tourism Authority, but he wasn't. He went there as a friend first. He wasn't there as the board. He wasn't there. He was there for that. That's the reason why when we ask these questions to him and he cannot answer them, is because he never have approval from his board. He never have approval from HDA. Right? He never have none of that. None of that was approved. He was at the meeting because he was asked to sit in with the judge. And that's the part that just clouds everything. You know, we cannot do this. We got to past practices. We got to put our friendship aside and find out again what is the best interest of the people of Hawaii legally. You know, because sometimes you cannot do stuff in the back because it always comes back in the front. And the only people hurting today is the people of Hawaii. And I know you guys had the good intentions. You guys went, but I guarantee you, they would advise you that the AG and nobody else was a part of this thing. You guys would have went to the meeting. If you guys was advised that the AG never know nothing and nobody else was nothing, only them guys in the room and you guys, would you guys end up going to that meeting knowing that they never have that advice by the AG?
Obviously not, but we weren't aware of that.
Thank you, Chair.
Both of you mentioned that mediation was actually successful and there was a two contract solution. Can you tell us what are the terms of the two contract solution?
Essentially, it divided it into two pieces. The RFP called for destination marketing and destination management, and that's how it was split.
What was the dollar figure for destination management and other?
I don't have it off the top of my head, but
It was just over $20 million for each party.
So it was a $40 million contract. Is that for 3 years or was that for just?
That's for the first year.
the first year, and I think it was 25.5 million for CNHA and 21.5 for HVCB.
But the original RFP, wasn't it $17 million?
It was, the original RFP was 34 for a number for
2 years.
for a year, 2 years. Yeah.
So we went from $34 million for 2 years to $40 million for 1 year
Mhm.
under what was.
Right.
And you guys were happy with that?
Well, that's better than walking out than walking in.
Yeah. We were happy with the solution, yes.
Yeah, but it seems like someone's buying your happiness.
What's
That
that?
wasn't based on any, what can you do here and what can you do here? It was,
We
let me throw $20 million at each of you and then just.
relied on being told by our client and the DBED director.
I think for us, I mean, it's been a painful journey, very long, so we were interested in getting to work, starting to begin the process in which we could show the people of Hawaii what we brought to the table, and so that was our driving effort to try and find the solution.
And they told you they had the money.
We were told that there was funding for it, yes. It was ARPA funds that would supplement HTA funds.
Question.
One question. So going forward, listening to what the governor said and Mike McCartney's recommendation, you feel that this thing should be separated? I mean, each of you can answer you guys own. You guys think it should be separated, or she had been left alone and been how it has been proposed for the second time?
My feeling is they're both extremely important. But the chances of finding, one organization in Hawaii that has the best skills in both the skills aren't necessarily going to be mutually inclusive. So you might need to separate it to get the best possible people in the two separate things. They are different categories.
I mean, Senator, I would just say that I believe CNHA was fairly awarded. I believe that I don't agree, and neither does our attorneys or external counsel agree with the SPO's decision or what she mentioned today. But we are open to a conversation that allows us a path forward, but that's not without negating our what we believe is our legal rights to this award. But we're looking for a path. So
So for both of you guys, it's the same question, both of you guys can answer them. We're putting this all together from start to finish, because a lot of people are thinking that CNHA, the rumor going around the building, I never hear about it, nobody talked to me this way, but anyway. And CNHA was custom built this second one for them. And it was that special treatment that they got. Not the hard work that they would put in, but the special treatment they got. And that's the reason why we're in the predicament we are. So again, individually, how hard did you guys work in putting this, I guess, whatever together? How, you guys, the first one that you guys got protest, and the second one, how hard it was for you guys, putting you guys.
Well, how much manpower and how much, and the dollar amount to put into the RFP?
First of all, we foot that bill. That's not state money.
Yeah.
It's been hundreds of thousands of dollars.
And
we've spent a lot of money, almost the same amount, if not more. But this was a collective coming together of not just CNHA. It was an entire collective team that assembled and worked tirelessly around the clock for weeks. So this notion that senators, I mean, it's come to my attention too, that there's that thought, and that's simply not true. We worked hard for this. We went in good faith, and saw that there was alignment between what HT was calling for and the work that we did as a collective.
Question is, when was this contract to have started?
Originally, it was January 1, 2022.
Yeah.
2020.
The first one was January 1 of 2022.
So are we saying right now there is no contract in place to manage this tourism piece?
The contract in place is the one that's just been extended.
2021 contract.
Just the marketing component.
HCV has continued to be extended.
Correct.
And that was for $17 million.
Yeah.
So that extension is what's been extended.
So the $17 million that you were to get for $20 million, what was that for?
So essentially, that was to conduct primarily the destination management, as well as some of the programmatic things that HTA currently awards. So included in that was destination management, programmatic support of HTA, and there was some degree of marketing for in-state.
And did you have a previous contract?
Did I have a previous, we've
Did-
had,
CNHA have a previous contract?
we've had previous contracts with HTA, not specific.
Yes, so right now, who is doing that part?
That's what is on the agenda with HTA to, so they basically compiled a bunch of contracts into this one. And so those are in need of getting executed, but we've asked them to put on hold until we can find resolution. So no one.
So basically, there was no extension to a contract for that marketing portion, the destination portion.
Well, the current HVCB has the destination management contract that ends at the end of this year, at the end of this month.
It's destination
Oh, sorry,
marketing.
May.
Okay, so you
marketing,
have,
The destination management is kind of an expansion of the contract.
okay, thank you.
And did the board let both of you know when they're gonna take action so that we know what next steps at the last meeting?
They did. So December 22nd is when it's agendized. Of course, we believe the protest that we filed, which is we're glad to hear that they think otherwise. So at least we know what our next move is at this point. But at this point, we were assuming that they would render a decision on our protests. And so we're hoping that they still do that. And if they don't think it's moot, then we got to look at other options that we might have. But we understand it to be December 22nd as their next decision-making date.
And we, of course, were very disappointed that the contract was rescinded also, because with it went our protest. So.
Any other questions?
So where it leave you guys from here? Even if they come up with a decision on December 22nd, hundreds of thousands of dollars out. Putting in for, say the next RFP is then thrown out and securing the third RFP. You've got the capital behind that to then work the same load, or we just gonna mirror the proposal that, you know what I mean? Like,
Well, I think it depends on the RFP because
Yeah.
it could be one RFP that they can say allows two or more contracts. Or if it's going to be two separate contracts, because if it's two separate, it sounds like HVCB is saying they're not going to really go after the management part.
And both of our work products are out there right now in the public, and both.
well, that's what I mean, so
It's exposed.
that's what I mean, so with you two guys, you could have 10 other people now. I mean, you have a major disadvantage now.
Yep. Both of us.
And you think that's in the best interest of the state?
It's not in the best interest of HVCB, I can tell you that. Nor CNHA.
Same here. I don't think it's in our interest either.
It's been a long process, and we talk about a year. We started working on it a year ago, September.
When did you guys have conversations or did you have any with the AG and the SPO?
I've never consulted with SPO or the AG on this. We were
Okay,
working through HTA and DBED.
only at the last meeting, they were there.
They were here, but yeah, we just heard their testimony.
Oh, you mean at the WAM?
Yeah.
No, I'm
Yeah.
talking about the meeting you had with them right after Thanksgiving.
Oh, I didn't have, we
Oh.
weren't there.
They weren't there. This was a media discussion, DBED. So it was John and I, the mediator, and there was a portion of that mediation where DBED and HTA entered the room.
Which date was that?
That was like right before Thanksgiving. I
Okay.
don't know the specific.
Okay, it was after we posted the agenda.
Yeah.
It was after we posted the agenda.
Oh, I'm sorry. You're talking about the time in which, so Mike McCartney called us to his office the morning of your hearing. That's where we first learned that his plans to rescind.
No, but is that when you first learned that the mediation wouldn't work as well?
Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, officially, that's when we heard he was going to rescind the contract. That we had heard, that was that same Thanksgiving week. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving. We had heard, I believe it was a week before, that the meeting that had been held without us, with the AG and the procurement office did not bear fruit, so to speak.
Okay, yeah, well, you weren't, so you didn't participate in that meeting. Do you know when that meeting was?
I think it was. It was
Okay.
Tuesday before
It was-
Thanksgiving, I believe.
Okay,
I don't.
yeah, it was a week, right, almost a week right before we had a WAM hearing. And then on the day, the morning of the WAM hearing, that's when you found out the
That's-
rescinding.
Yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Adjourn.